Sarutobi Hiruzen stopped pressing against the invisible barrier only because it ceased to exist. He stumbled forward a few steps, his knees aching. He was too old for this bullshit. The baby was screaming, wailing for the milk and comfort his cooling mother was no longer in a position to give. Hiruzen's subordinates immediately went to their fallen yandame's side, though some turned to his wife. Hiruzen alone went to the baby lying in the middle of the smoking candles. Golden Fuzz hinted that the child followed more closely in his father's footsteps than his mother's. The whisker marks pointed to the child having shared his mother's body with the beast now sharing his. An unfortunate tale. Hiruzen scooped the child up and signaled that his shadows attend him. Two flitted away from the yandame's bloody corpse to stand just behind him. Gather what personnel you can and search neighboring villages and beyond, but not Konoha, for a woman capable of breastfeeding this boy alongside her own child if necessary. Preference will be given to a mother without a child to compete with him. Find a bottle of breast milk for him in the meantime, even if you have to plunder Kushina's corpse. He needs sustenance if he's going to live. Present a list to me within 3 days. We do not have much time to settle him before the chaos clears enough that people begin asking questions. Minato-sama sacrificed his son. It is our job to see that my successor's gamble pays off. The shadows disappeared. The baby continued to howl. Sighing, Hiruzen began the trek back to the office he had given up to the promising young man who would begin to rot soon. Jiraiya was enlightening when the message caught up with him. The toad shuffled uncomfortably as the legendary ninja, once part of a trio of legendary ninjas, buried his face in his palms and started crying. The Sandane concluded several things when ANBU agents finished reporting what little they had managed to gather from the place he had sent Uzumaki Kushina to give birth. The first rattled him. His wife was dead. The urge to shake and rage like a much younger man blazed through him, but time had given him external calm many found frightening. This calm just left him sick and exhausted and alone. How was he going to tell his sons? The world was not kind to shaken fathers, because there were further details to ponder. The guards that should have prevented Biwako's murderer's entry were dead as well, having been found after their corpses bobbed to the surface of the river further downstream. The Mednin that had been assigned to assist Biwako was also dead. That meant there were no witnesses. Hiruzen was not alive at his ripe old age by being unsuspicious and naive. If there were no witnesses, it was likely that was intentional. This implied that Kyubi had not broken out on his own, since all these murdered witnesses were in no way singed or showed any other signs that implied the Kyubi had been behind their death. That implied a third party, since Sarutobi would not even pause to consider the possibility Kushina or Minato had murdered their attendants. Inuzuka ANBU had verified a foreign sense presence in the cave. This third party had apparently been involved in events that had broken Kyubi free of Kushina and left little Naruto an orphan. Minato had willingly put the Kyubi in his son after bearing loving witness to the suffering it had inflicted on the wife he adored instead of allowing his dying wife to take the Kyubi with her. Hiruzen was certain that this third party was a major threat and probably the linchpin behind all this death. He was also cautiously assuming that Minato had left Naruto Kyubi as insurance. Dangerous insurance. The boy would need guarding before being able to cash in on his father's parting gift. In the end, Hiruzen had the uneasy feeling that his concern over the stress on the seal from childbirth had played right into the third party's hands. But this implied that the third party had known about Kyubi and Kushina, had known about the seal's weakness, and had somehow seen use in something as wild as Kyubi. That cave had been a long way from Konoha, and no one had seen or sensed the beast approaching until it had been on the wrong side of Konoha's wall. It was as if the yandame had teleported it there or it had been summoned there, since the former was as likely as the moon being made of cheese and Hiruzen being able to convince his unruly younger son that smoking cigarettes was not something you should start doing in order to show your pipe-smoking father how behind the times he was. Hiruzen rubbed his eyes. The list of people that could control the Kyubi and summon it so stealthily from inside Konoha without alerting the barrier team to a foreign presence was very short, so short indeed that it should be non-existent. Naruto started sniveling, stirring in the basket Hiruzen had dug out of his attic. The Hokage made a beckoning motion, and a snake-masked agent appeared before him and passed him a bottle of milk. And what if he's unhappy about his diaper instead? Will you assist me with that as well? With a snort, the agent disappeared. Hiruzen chuckled. The disturbing thought that if Uchiha Madara was still somehow alive despite all expectations, how he had figured out that Kushina was the new vessel and when and where she would be at her weakest nagged at him. A traitor in their midst wasn't an implication Hiruzen was comfortable with. Rat 12 stumbled back into Konoha around midnight, passing over the wall gracelessly. Despite the hour, He headed straight for the Hokage monument, and climbed the cliff to stand in front of ANBU headquarters. The two Boer agents standing guard at the door quizzed him briefly before letting him pass. He faced the same ordeal twice more as he made his way deeper into the warren that ANBU maintained. Dragon, one looked up from his paperwork when Rat finally knelt before him. So? Rat raised his head to attempt to read his faceless leader. I've found a prostitute who might suit her child. Aborted? Rat shrugged. But very late. She claims miscarriage. Rumor has it that she was beaten late in her third trimester, and that it killed the baby. In any case, she's desperate for money, knows how to keep her mouth shut, and is miraculously clean of disease for the most part, though I suspect warts or herpes. She's new to her trade, though she's been exposed to it for a long time. Money would motivate her to be mobile. She's lactating, so she should suit. Dragon, one nodded. Her name and location, for the list. May, no clan name apparently, from Tanzaka Guy's pleasure district. He shuffled, torn between curiosity and weariness. How long is the list? 10 so far. Quite a few have yet to report in. All of them have one flaw or another. Go get some rest. Hiruzen inspected the list. 40 names with their locations and their circumstances graced the paper. Some women had other children. Others were bound to a husband, which would make things complicated. One more person to hold the secret, to weaken the security of the secret. No, a husband was not acceptable. Neither were other children, as they were just as likely to blab, if less likely to need to be told the whole story. That shortened the list to 3 candidates. One widow woman had lost her child to health problems her village physician had been unable to handle. A woman deep in grief would benefit from Naruto's happy manners, but she had family who would ask questions. Yet another impossibility. The second was a prostitute. Not a particularly happy placing for Naruto, since the agent had marked the woman as crass and ill-tempered, but she was alone in the world. The last woman lived with her brother. Hiruzen glanced at Naruto, who was drooling in his sleep. My poor boy, it looks like the whore is your best choice. You and I will have to be quiet about this though. My teammates and Danzo want me to keep you here, where you'll be protected and forever watched. We cannot chance it though, little man. Who is to say that you being here, in the midst of anger and grief, would be better for you? No, best you escape with a guard strong in the way of disguise and secrecy. Someone who can help you escape the fastest is best because fighting Uchiha Madara is not an option if he really did survive his battle with Shodame-sama. Naruto snoozed on, oblivious. Hiruzen cocked a finger, and a RAM agent appeared before him. Bring Dragon, one to me. Tell him to bring along the roster of spies and scouts. Dragon, one spread the list out before his newly reinstated Hokage, but the old man focused on him instead. Who's the best at hiding? Conventional hiding? Asked Dragon. Hiding and blending in, maintaining cover. Dragon pointed at Rat, 12, 67, 173, Snake, 5, 17, Monkey, 12, and 25. Which of those is the best at escaping? Dragon eliminated Rat, 173, and Snake, 17. Who is the best at extending these skills to another person? Dragon eliminated Rat, 12, Snake, 5, and Monkey, 25. Which of those that remain is the most loyal, the best, the most fit to be a guardian to 2 for years? Dragon hesitated. He pointed at Rat, 67 at last. He's unattached, so his absence from Konoha won't be as big a deal as it would for the others. He's respectable but has no experience as a guardian save for the occasional guarding mission and his mother hen role in any team. Is this 4? He glanced at Naruto. The Sandaime nodded, having been able to see the motion through the eye slits in Dragon's mask. Then I would suggest one other. Who? The boy who possesses the lost element. The Sandaime frowned for a moment before he worked it out and grinned. A wise idea, however little I like the idea of sending him out there. The village is not the ideal environment for him in his orphaned and experimental state, given how we keep him in ANBU. Playing older brother would help him adjust, maybe. Sarutobi-sama nodded. I'll check in with his therapist. Otherwise, bring Rat, 67 before me and make sure that Inoichi is on standby. I can't take any risks. Someone knew about Kushina. We must ensure that secrecy will be absolute until the boy is strong enough that delivering him to his godfather will not be a hasty move. Dragon gathered up his scrolls and saluted. I'll ensure that the Uchiha know nothing of the move. The Uchiha? Sarutobi-sama was frowning. Whispers have been going around that many of the Uchiha adults were missing the night of the attack. Also, one of my agents noted that Uchiha Mikoto was the only person Uzumaki Kushina-sama spoke to before leaving the village with Biwako-sama. The Kyuubi has long been a symbol of their strength. The Hokage looked troubled when he dismissed Dragon 1 without another word. The Uchiha are suspect? Hiruzen couldn't say he was surprised. The Uchiha did flaunt their association with fire. However, Uchiha Madara had split from the Uchiha that remained in Konoha, spiting their refusal to help him rebel. His hatred for them was probably only second to his hatred for the Shodaime. Would he have set aside that hatred for the chance to reclaim the Kyuubi? The scent had been foreign though. He would have to make sure the Inuzuka Anbu went through the Uchiha area. Scents could be masked, but at least this would give a bit more certainty. All this speculation of course begged the question of what on earth Madara wanted with Kyuubi. The obvious answer was the destruction of Konoha. It was likely, but Hiruzen felt that for all the symbolism of stealing back a lost weapon and unleashing it on the very place that had laid claim to it, it didn't seem to be enough. Uchiha Madara had been powerful enough to carve a valley when he had clashed with Shodaime-sama. He was capable of leveling Konoha without Kyuubi. Little man, did the man who interrupted your birth say anything to you about why he had gone to all this trouble? Naruto only whimpered for a diaper change. Takashi rolled his shoulder nervously as he peered out from behind his rat mask at the sparse details the mission scroll provided him. Duration, 5 to 10 years. Breaks, none permitted. Location, fire, absolute location yet to be decided. Essential skills, child rearing, undercover operation techniques, further skills to be disclosed later. Team size 4. Client, Yondaime and Sandaime Hokage. It was strange that the Yondaime claimed to be requesting this mission when he had died 4 days ago, and the mission had been logged as of that morning. Takashi supposed that meant it was being done according to the Yondaime's will, or it aided his former purposes. The Sandaime and the Council were the only ones with enough authority to legally tack his name onto this mission, not that anyone but the Council, ANBU, and the Hokage would ever see the details of this top-secret mission. Well? Said Dragon 1. Sir, this is very secret? Very. You are not allowed to discuss this mission with anyone other than me and the Sandaime Hokage. The council was not allowed to be involved. That made Takashi nervous because that meant that if the Sandaime also died, this mission would have no one heading it, and the only one aware of its existence would be the team and Dragon 1. Is it very important to the well-being of the village? Dragon 1 paused. I am betting so, though I think it will take many years for the true extent of the mission's importance to become obvious. Sandaime-sama better understands the particulars. I need to mention that if you accept this mission, you will be undergoing a deep scan by the interrogation commander. So it was very important. And very secret. Takashi gulped silently. May I have a day to consider it? 6 hours, Dragon 1 said grudgingly. There isn't much time. Delay only makes things worse. So it was time sensitive too. Rat 67 handed the mission scroll back, accepted the silencing seal Dragon 1 painted on the back of his hand, and slipped out of the room. As he wandered out of the warren of ANBU headquarters and along the top of the Hokage monument, Takashi considered his options as he carefully kept his silence seal intact. Any disturbance of the lines would lead to interrogation. This was obviously a mission he was not allowed to talk about at all. That meant that if he did refuse the mission, he would be seeing a Yamanaka to edit out his knowledge of it. Scary stuff. Did he want to throw aside his life in Konoha, such as it was, for the next 5 to 10 years? He wasn't used to long missions, but the longest he had been out of the village at a stretch had been 2 years on an undercover mission in Lightning. When he had gotten back, it had taken months to reconnect with his friends, never mind his former teammates. It would be at least twice as bad when he returned if he accepted this mission. No doubt, his crush, Hyuga Sora, would be bound in marriage with children by then, not that she reciprocated at all. NBU agents didn't have personal lives for the most part. He'd heard Snake 28 telling the Hataki kid that once in the mess hall shortly after the kid had claimed a dog mask. The fact that Snake 28 was a conniving old bitch didn't make her words any less true. Sighing, Takashi headed back inside, only 18 minutes of his 6 hours used up. The rest of his time could be spent figuring out what to do with his worldly belongings and his apartment. ANBU would handle his landlord, either by paying off his rent until his contract ran out by subletting his place or by terminating his lease early. His stuff could go into storage or be sold off. Takashi was leaning towards the latter since the chances he would come back with the same tastes were slim. He'd learned after his last mission that returning to his reclaimed and refurnished apartment hadn't been the same as coming home. All his trappings had felt odd, as though they belonged in a museum. It had been a disconcerting experience. He had every intention of avoiding it this time by selling everything except his photo albums. Takashi swayed slightly in his chair as Yamanaka Inoichi shut the door behind himself. Sandaime-sama was watching him with a pitying and proud expression. Thank you for enduring that. I suspect a spy, so I had to be sure. Hi, Hokage-sama. Sarutobi-sama clapped his hands, and a genjutsu dissolved, revealing that a collection of 3 cushions carefully stacked in the far corner of the office was instead a basket. The old Hokage shuffled across the room to collect the wicker contraption, revealing that a baby with blonde fuzz lay nestled amidst the blankets it contained. Rat 67 suddenly understood why Yondaime-sama was considered in on this mission. Permission to speak freely? Granted, Takashi-kun. He relaxed slightly. What are the whisker marks from? It was not widely known, but Uzumaki Kushina-sama was Senju Mito's successor. Both women had the kyubi sealed inside them, making them what are commonly called jinchuriki. Children carried in jinchuriki seem to inevitably carry some mark of their unusual confinement. Mito-sama's child bore similar marks. Kyubi escaped from Kushina-sama somehow during her delivery of Naruto, which happened outside of the village because giving birth weakened the seal used on kyubi. Unfortunately, the events you know of came to pass, and the Yondaime and his wife are no longer with us. I witnessed them sealing kyubi into their son, Uzumaki Naruto. Takashi glanced at the boy as the Sandaime pulled aside the blanket to reveal the babe's belly. The Hokage somehow pushed chakra through the boy's system, revealing a dark seal around the belly button, which still had some dried umbilical cord attached to it. Someone brought kyubi into Konoha. Someone murdered everyone at the birth except for Kushina-sama, Minato-sama, and Naruto-kun here, our sole true survivor. That someone found out about the secret birth despite all our efforts and security. We must get Naruto-kun out of Konoha and safely hidden. You were selected because this mission is not about fighting. It is about hiding this boy and ensuring he grows up well enough. You will lead this mission and do whatever it takes to make it succeed. What happens to the boy when the mission ends? He will go to his godfather, Jiraiya. I would send him to him now, but it is likely that Jiraiya will be watched, given the close ties between him and Minato-sama. Putting them together at this point isn't wise. So you don't want him to enter the academy? At the moment, no. Our security has been severely breached. I cannot see Konoha as a safe place any longer, not for the bearer of the kyubi. Yes, the attacker waited until Kushina-sama was outside our walls, but I do not know if that was because that was where she was giving birth or if our defenses were what warned him off. I suspect the former given how kyubi was likely summoned into the village. Naruto-kun, being a man, will never suffer the weakness of childbirth, so his seal will remain strong. It is in the assailant's best interest to kill him as soon as possible, and wait for kyubi to escape death. That or drive Naruto into losing himself to kyubi. So, said Takashi carefully, struggling to keep up for the first few years, I should expect assassination, while later on I should expect someone to brainwash Naruto-kun into voiding the seal somehow? Or giving in to rage. Mito-sama and Kushina-sama noted that darker emotions tended to weaken them to kyubi's influence. The Sandaime settled the blanket back over Naruto when the babe protested the cold. Now, the team. You will have another agent with you. Tenzo-kun is young enough that he will be able to act as an elder brother to the boy. Better still, Tenzo-kun carries the same genetic skills that Shodaime-sama did in almost all respects, save that his strength with these gifts doesn't compare. So you hope he'll be able to exert some control over kyubi if Naruto does start losing himself. Exactly, Takashi-kun. You are quick to catch on. Good. Now your other teammate is less reliable than Tenzo-kun, unfortunately, but she is absolutely necessary, at least for a few months. A few months, eh, milk mother? Exactly. Mei-san is a courtesan from Tanzakagai. She has lost her own child, but she still is producing milk, so she will be able to wean Naruto-kun. Her loyalty is unfortunately only through money, so you will have to be wary of her. Also, what to do with her after her usefulness is ended is up to you. I ask that you contact Konoha for assistance in this matter only if you deem it absolutely necessary. In other words, he could terminate her in order to ensure secrecy if he felt bothering with a memory block would be too troublesome. Have you chosen the location for the mission? Have you selected a cover? The Sandaime shook his head. I've deliberately left that up to you. I would rather that there is no way Konoha can provide leads to where you are. You will be provided with relay seals, so you can communicate directly with Dragon, one or myself if necessary, but I ask that you use them only in the direst circumstances except for the occasional all is well. You are running this show. Do whatever you must to keep this child safe and raise him to be resourceful as best you can, Takashi-kun. Also, do the same for Tenzu-kun. His upbringing has been very dark. I've assigned him to you in the hope that leaving Konoha will bring some light into his life. The boy codenamed Tenzu glanced up from checking his kunai at a knock on his door. Who is it? Rat, 67. Tenzu struggled to remember which of the many rat agents 67 was. He failed. What is it? Mission Tiger, 19. I need you to come with me to a briefing room. He gathered his kunai back into his pouch, donned his mask, and slid open the door. Rat, 67 was average height, average coloring for a farmer from what little skin Tenzu could see, and of medium build. His mask was primarily inked with green, meaning he worked solo, but there was some of the expected black and red to show he worked as a team captain and a subordinate on occasion. He wore the standard uniform without the cloak. As a rat agent, the man had to have leadership abilities, so it was odd that he worked primarily solo. It was more common for monkeys and snakes to be solo agents, being master spies and master assassins respectively. Other than these observations, Tenzu knew little of the man. Come. We're keeping Hokage-sama waiting. Tenzu hurried now. He was more used to Minato-sama, but Sarutobi-sama was also kind to him, even if it was more of a guilty kindness than Minato-sama's was. He had heard that Orochimaru, the man who had altered him, had been Sarutobi-sama's student, which explained the guilt. Still, if that guilt included candied walnuts and meat buns, Tenzu was not going to complain. When they slipped into Dragon 1's private briefing room, Sarutobi-sama activated the seals that warded against eavesdropping as a baby in a basket on the table started squirming and wailing. This mission must be very secret. Tenzu had never seen Sarutobi-sama use the seals in his office or in the ANBU briefing rooms before. Masks off, said Rat, 67, reaching for his own. What? Tenzu was astounded even as he began to obey. It is either pardon or why, Tenzu-kun, Sarutobi-sama said. What implies that you did not hear the order and is much ruder than pardon. Hi, Hokage-sama. Rat, 67 set his wooden mask on the table and settled in a chair adjacent to the Hokage. Tenzu set his tiger mask on the table as well and sat in the last chair. Tenzu-kun, for this mission, you are being assigned a codename, as is Rat, 67. It will be a long mission, so I'm sure you will grow into it. You will both go unmasked. Rat, 67 will be your squad leader, and he may change your codename at any point. Hi, Hokage-sama. Rat slouched in his chair, knitting his fingers together as he set his clasped hands on the table. Seiichi will be your first name, Tiger, 19. I will be Mamoru. The baby shall be called. He glanced at Sarutobi-sama. The old man sighed. Yes, he'll have a different name too. I just worry because he's young enough that his codename will stick for him. He won't understand. I trust you and Seiichi-kun can explain things to him, Mamoru-kun. He shall be Yuji-kun. Mei-san will need a different name as well. Rat shuffled slightly, betraying nerves. Seiichi wondered who this Mei-san was and why she was frightening for his team leader. I will collaborate with her on it. She may not understand the reasoning. Very good, Mamoru-kun. Now, Seiichi-kun, the mission is to be a brother to Yuji-kun here. Mamoru-kun will be your father figure, and Mei-san will act as Yuji-kun's mother figure for a time. We're counting on you to teach Yuji-kun how to be a good boy and how to begin to become a good ninja. As a good boy, he must learn how to make friends with boys and girls, learn how to play with them properly, and learn how to respect his elders. As a good ninja, he must know how to be sneaky, be swift, and be strong. Mamoru-kun will help you teach him how to be a good ninja. Seiichi itched to ask why all this, but Anbu was not supposed to know the why. Only the how. Hi, Hokage-sama. This mission will last years, so you will have lots of time to get it right. Sarutobi-sama handed over a book. Seiichi took it, resisting the urge to flip through its pages. This is for you and you alone, unless Mamoru-kun absolutely needs to use it. You must never let Mei-san touch it or know it exists. What about Yuji-kun? Asked Rat, glancing at the baby. That will be for Seiichi-kun to decide. You may open the book. Seiichi forced himself to go slowly, inspecting the cover, noting the subtle lines inscribed in the painted canvas cover. A seal? Yes. Seiichi now opened the cover and investigated one blank page after another. A journal? As a cover. I would recommend using it as one to increase your cover as well. Every once in a while, write an entry about your day, in character. Now, repeat after me. Dear Fire, I've been thinking. Dear Fire, I've been thinking? Hokage-sama handed him a pencil. Write it in kanji. Seiichi carefully scrawled down the kanji, struggling to remember the correct characters. No, Seiichi-kun, that one needs to be something different. Seiichi quickly scratched out the character. The Hokage shook his head. No, you'll have to start again. Erase your previous attempt entirely. The words are a sequence that the seal recognizes. They must be written correctly without interruption, or the seal will not activate. Seiichi made liberal use of his eraser as Mamoru-san and Sarutobi-sama corrected his stroke order. When he finally got the phrase correctly down, the characters were wiped from the page, leaving only the pressure indentations. Sarutobi-sama pulled out a matching book. Keep writing, Seiichi-kun. Say anything you like. I would like to thank Sarutobi-sama for trusting me with this mission. I don't understand why Yuji-kun needs to be hidden. The words faded from the page, the same way the opening phrase had, though a little slower. Are you done? Seiichi nodded. Now write that as a weight off my mind in katakana. That is the end sequence for the seal. This time, Seiichi had no trouble. Katakana were easier. Now write something simple anywhere on the page, even over where you were writing before. Tigers are good fighters. The words stayed on the page. Where did my other words go? Sarutobi opened his book and showed him the empty pages. He took out a pencil and scribbled 3 fire characters on the top of his page. Seiichi's words appeared on the first empty line, exactly as he had written them. For you, the code for getting my messages is a little more complicated. At the top of a page, write and what do you think, in katakana and my reply should appear. Sarutobi-sama turned his book to face him and scrawled a short message. Go on. Hi, Hokage-sama. Seiichi watched the Hokage's writings appear on his page, starting on the first empty line. Yuji-kun is being hunted by bad people. We must keep him safe. Now wipe my words by writing that was helpful. You must be careful when you are writing with a pen or a pencil. As you saw on your first page, the markings disappear, but the pressure marks are still there. Someone very clever could figure out your messages. If you can, try to use a brush and light pressure. That way, there will be no trace. Why give this to me, Hokage-sama? The old man smiled sadly. You have been made into the Shodame's image, but you have only begun to learn how to touch those gifts, never mind how to harness them. I do not have time to teach you now that you must go with Yuji-kun and Mamoru-kun. So, we will use this method to keep in touch. I will give you lessons through the journal. You will write any questions or concerns to me in there as well using the seal to send them to me and wipe them so no one else will be able to see them. This is a very complicated bit of seal work, so you must guard it carefully. It is valuable. Other ninja would find this very useful. We only let our agents use this in very special cases. Thank you, Hokage-sama, Seiichi whispered. You're welcome, Seiichi-kun. Now you can only read my reply once, so be sure to memorize it before you wipe it. Never forget to wipe my reply before you set your diary aside. May languidly licked beads of perspiration off the side of her straw, letting her lashes brush just so against her cheeks. She heard someone's breath catch to her left along the counter and let a slow smile curl the corners of her mouth as she put the straw back in her soda and drew the tip between her lips. Sweetness, fizz, and artificial flavor blasted her tongue, but she was more focused on the breathing rate of the person watching her. Her target had been to her right, a youngish man out with his date. She would have passed her self-set test if she had managed to drag his eyes from his date to her. She had failed. Instead, May had drawn the attention of the woman sitting 3 seats to her left. Oh well. That was fine. Her ached, and she couldn't keep a shirt clean and dry nowadays. Miscarrying was a pain in the ass. She hadn't had a sane client ever since she had failed to terminate her mistake in the first few weeks. She had stopped trying after that. She'd done some research. She didn't want to kill something with a head, with eyes. No, at that point, she'd been resigned to stretch marks and being stretched out down where being tight was a necessity. Her dreams of silk kimonos and tea ceremonies had died painfully. She had resigned herself to fucking sickos who had a thing for pregnant women and milk heavy. Then the worst sicko had decided to beat the baby out of shape while it was still in her. With his feet. She fought the grimace off her face and sighed instead. Grimaces were never sexy. Sighs, deep and mournful or light and wistful, could be a hook. The woman watching her cleared her throat and called for the bill. May traced the corkscrew curls she had somehow threatened and tortured out of its genetically programmed ridiculously tight coils into something halfway passable. The woman dropped an overly generous tip and fled. May chuckled quietly. Obviously, someone was not comfortable with being anything but het. Her mirth was cut short when the bust of her dress pressed against her carefully placed arm felt very damp. God damn it. The shop's bell clanged as someone pulled the door open. Strange, she couldn't hear his footsteps. Mei-san? She jumped at how close behind her his voice was, spinning to stare at him, her carefully crafted pose ruined. The man's badly chopped hair and patchy beard caught her attention before she found his dark eyes. The contempt in them told her that he wasn't here for her cunt. His contempt, his silence, his bad haircut, and the scars she could see on his exposed skin led her to one conclusion. Mamoru-san? With a weary groan and a teasing smile, he sat down next to her. If it wasn't for the lingering contempt hiding in his eyes, she would have thought he was an old friend she was supposed to be meeting. Maybe he could have been a former classmate from the school she had never attended regularly enough to remember its name, or where her desk was. You didn't get me anything? I'm terribly sorry, she gushed, carefully positioning her arm to hide her wet bust again. He had noticed it in the penetrative glance he had met her with. If his contempt hadn't made her so angry, she would have been slightly embarrassed. It's been a while. I wasn't sure you liked iced tea anymore, so I didn't dare jump the gun. Ginger ale is always a much safer bet. I've gotten over iced tea. Ha! You see? It's not like it takes long. May leaned forward and waved the proprietress over. A ginger ale for my friend and a kettle corn parfait just for me. Mamoru-san's face was a picture of disgust. Popcorn and whipped cream? Hush. I told you the flavors jibe. The proprietress returned with their orders, and they set to absent chatter, carefully taking their cues from each other. May was a consummate actress by necessity. Men, and women, needed to be convinced she was enjoying herself, against her will sometimes, since it made them come back for more ego-stroking. It seemed Mamoru-san was no slouch either. They ended up moving to a booth where she could lean back against the two red vinyl seats, and spoon the odd confection into her mouth while he sipped from his tumbler, elbows on the table. He knocked the conversation off its light-hearted track after a lull. If you could pick a name, any name, for yourself, what would it be? You can't pick May. With a slight frown, she licked her spoon sensuously to see if he would twitch, but he was stone. A name for myself? She dragged a finger along the inside of her parfait glass, scooping up chocolate and whipped cream traces. She sucked her finger clean slowly and very thoroughly until Mamoru-san snorted. You sure that's clean enough? Maybe there's some ghost of sticky residue still haunting your fingerprint. She pouted at him. Mean it. It tastes good. I don't want to waste any of it. A name, greedy guts? She huffed. Fine, Hiromi. That way my name would perfectly reflect my physical perfection. He puffed a breathy laugh into his forearms before raising his head. Very well then, no takebacks. Why would I? She asked, smearing the last traces of her treat onto her finger, setting her glass aside, and dropping her spoon in with a chink as she cleaned her finger off for the last time. You'll see. Should we get going? If she understood this correctly, this was the point where she had to accept or reject the job offer. There was some baby they wanted her to feed. The amount of money they had offered her was staggering, more than enough to maybe restore her dreams of silken kimono and poetry. If she wanted to be stupid and say no, she would beg off. May was not stupid, just bruised and burdened with leaking. Sure. Mamoru led the slut from the sweets shop through Tanzakagai's streets to the hotel he had left Seiichi and Yuji to lay low at. She took his hand, threaded her fingers through his, and swung their linked arms playfully every now and then as she chattered to fill their silence. He tried to keep up, tried to keep being absorbed in catching up with a classmate, but she was too much. Everything about her was sex. She was so focused on it, on projecting it, and on forcing everyone within a certain radius of her to make her the object of their sexual desires. He wasn't interested, so her insistence kept bouncing off his wall, which only made her push harder. He would need to lay out some ground rules and force her to settle down. He needed her focused on Yuji, not on plying her trade. Besides, she would freak poor Seiichi-kun out. Hiromi. She was forced to stop with him in the hotel lobby, her momentum and her grip on his hand spinning her to face him. She cocked her head questioningly. I need you to, he sighed and raked his free hand through his hair. Mamoru? Seiichi's not used to you know. He's not even 11. So can you? Tone it down. He allowed a relieved smile to curl his lips and soften the creases around his eyes. Yeah. She nodded and propped a hand on her hip. Silly Mamoru. You're still a worrywart. I would never spoil his virgin ears and eyes. This is just for you. He ignored her last words. He's still torn up about his shoulders slumped. I never thought she would. Hiromi-san paused for a long moment, obviously scrambling to catch up. No, I never considered it either, she whispered, squeezing his hand. It's okay. She's watching over you three. I'm sure of it. The whore was good. Very good. Mamoru relaxed internally, glad his doubts about her ability to count and make the proper deductions had been blasted to smithereens. He nodded and glanced up at her through his bangs. Yeah. She ducked down and peered up at him in order to better meet his gaze, a sad smile creasing her coffee skin. Let's go, huh? We can't keep Seiichi-kun waiting. With a decisive nod, he strode towards the stairs, not sparing the receptionist that had played audience to their performance a glance. Seiichi scowled at his brother as he crouched to make their eyes level, ignoring the breeze blowing his bangs into his eyes. Open your mouth, you brat. He kept a firm grip on the boy's arm. He had already had to chase him down the gangplank and didn't want him running any further. Yuji's big brown eyes gleamed with guile as he shook his head and shuffled his sandaled feet on the worn pier planks. Gulls shrieked despite the southern sea's attempt to shush them as the few fishing boats not out at sea for the day made their mooring lines creak as they rocked on the waves. Open your mouth. Spit it out. Yuji smiled big, his lips sealed together. I'll tell Mom. Yuji's smile faltered. And she'll tell Dad. Pouting, Yuji tipped his head forward and spat the metal nut into Seiichi's palm. It was liberally covered in saliva, but that was probably a good thing since Seiichi didn't have any water with him to rinse his brother's mouth out. He wiped the nut off on his pants and headed back on board, Yuji at his heels, to pass it back to his friend Kin, who had been cleaning some equipment on the schooner when Yuji had struck. Your brother's gross. Seiichi wiped his hand on his pants. Yeah, he is. I am not. Yuji whacked the back of Seiichi's thigh hard, but the might of a 5-year-old was pitiful compared to what their dad could dish out during secret training. Sure you are, Squirt, Kin, an apprentice fisherman and deckhand, insisted. What kind of sophisticated, unross person puts a rusty nut in their mouth? It's the best hiding spot. Seiichi facepalmed as Kin arched an eyebrow. What? You're not leaving without me this time. I'm coming. I'll catch the biggest fish and gut it. But you can't leave without me. You can't leave without that piece. Seiichi and Kin shared weary looks. Sure, kid. But I've got it now, so you've got nothing. Yuji smiled that suspiciously closed-lipped smile again and made to dash off, but Seiichi snagged the back of his shirt before he had gotten 2 steps. It wouldn't do to be too fast in front of civilians. Seiichi knelt again and cupped his palm back in front of Yuji's face. Out with it, brat. Mamoru put his other arm behind his back and began counting out his one-armed push-ups anew. You're going to stink up the house with your sweat, Hiromi sniped from the kitchen. You've got the window over the sink open, he said with well-worn calm. And the breeze stinks of fish. 22. 23. And I bet you don't even know where the boys are. 27. 28. You didn't pick up any gin for me, did you? 33. 34. We're having sashimi again. 36. Can we please have sex? He rolled his eyes. Long association and careful observation made him certain she was doing the same. What's the point of maintaining muscle definition if nobody gets to appreciate it? Wouldn't it feel nice to have someone smooth her fingers over the dips and planes? Hiromi. Wouldn't it feel good to have nails raking over your back? Hiromi. I know it would be nice to watch the shadows play over the... Goddamn it, woman, you're making me lose count. She snorted. I'll shut up if you let me cut your hair and shave that patchy excuse for overgrown stubble off. Done. Now be quiet. The boys will be home soon. Does turning on the radio count as being quiet? You know it does. So long as you're not talking, you're quiet. As always, she had the battered device tuned to a classical music station, one that favored traditional instruments like the biwa, her favorite, over the violin and such that were becoming so popular for movie music. The boys broke their peace. Yuji was hollering, as he often was, that he would prove himself in one way or another, and Seiichi was crunching up the gravel path in his wake. We're back, Yuji announced as he kicked off his sandals and swooped in to hug Hiromi's leg. She set aside her cleaver and wiped her hands on a rag before ruffling his genjutsu brown hair with a smile as he grinned up at her. Welcome back. Seiichi, as always, tidied up Yuji's sandals before taking off his own and padding across the kitchen to stand before Mamoru. The team leader shook his hair out of his eyes and glanced up at the 15-year-old. So? Nothing unusual. He put strange things in his mouth again. Niken! You did what? Said Hiromi, falling to her knees and prying Yuji's mouth open despite his inarticulate protests and the futile stink eye he aimed at his brother. Seiichi, get me a glass. With a sigh, the older boy obeyed Hiromi, swiping a cup from the cupboard and filling it with water before putting it into the woman's shaking hands. Take a mouthful, Yuji. Swish it around your mouth. Mom! Take a mouthful. Groaning, the young boy glared at his brother before caving and spitting the water into the sink when prompted. The process was repeated until the boy was using warm salt water and wailing about how awful his mother was. Only then did she relent. You don't go sticking strange things in your mouth, Yuji. Who knows where they have been? Yes, Mom. Go to your room, Mamoru rumbled, sitting cross-legged against the wall now that he had finished his last set. But Dad. Your room, Yuji. We have lots of secret work to do tonight. Take a nap. Groaning, Yuji stumbled from the room and stomped up the stairs. Yuji curled up on his futon. Stupid tattletale brother. He really did want to go out with the fishermen this year and show them all. He really would catch a big fish. But Mom said no. Dad said absolutely not. Seiichi Niken just shook his head. They didn't understand though. Just because he was afraid of the big water of the sea, he had to go out onto it and show it that he was the boss. Something in him cringed with terror when the storms brought the big waves to beat the beaches and splinter the piers. Those big waves carried huge logs that they threw high up onto the shore, so high that Yuji had never seen seaweed or high tide touch those places. Yuji needed to stand in the middle of those waves and snarl loudly and bare his teeth. When he told his father this, Dad had smiled the twinkly-eyed smile that meant he was laughing on the inside and had said, "Is that so?" Dad was quiet most of the time and you had to look really hard to see his chuckles, his grins, and his full-bellied laughs when they weren't out in public or with his work friends. They were all in the creases around his eyes and the twinkle in them. Only Mom could make him bring the laughter into the air at home when they had no guests. Yuji had always had the impression that Mom wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't sure what it had come from other than a sketchy memory of Mom shouting at Dad while Yuji clung to her leg and refused to let her go, but every now and then he was reminded of it. It was the way Dad and Seiichi Nizen would nod behind Mom's back and talk more when the three of them were out in the woods doing secret training while Mom slept back at home. However, Yuji was glad Mom was still with him. She made the house warm even when she and Dad were fighting because she fought loudly while Dad fought with silence. Seiichi Niken would always keep him out of their way when they were in the middle of a hurricane argument. His brother was the best, even if he was a tattletale, and was a daddy's boy. Niken had assured him many times that Yuji was the mama's boy. Yuji. Speak of the mine. Gui. I'm napping. If you're napping, you shouldn't be replying. I'm coming in. Yuji scowled and crossed his arms as a greeting to his brother, and the light the opening door brought in from the hallway. His frown faltered when he saw that Niken had brought the magic talking diary. Shh! Seiichi warned him, a finger pressed against his lips. Yuji pressed his hands over his mouth until Niken closed the door and settled beside him on the bed. Seiichi set the pot of ink carefully beside the futon, locking his eyes on Yuji, who nodded, silently promising not to knock the bottle over. Brother gave him the brush to hold while he flipped through the worn pages full of Niken's entries. Yuji wasn't supposed to read those since there was stuff about the girls he had crushes on, and about the bad stuff he and Kin had gotten up to when he wasn't with Yuji, which wasn't often. Niken stuck to him like a burr unless Dad was with him. Did you write to the book genie? Yuji whispered when Seiichi set the book down in front of him, 2 blank pages glowing in the dim light. I told him about how you're afraid of the ocean. Yuji scowled again. Why would you do that, butthead? Because the genie's always interested in you. He likes to hear about these things. It lets him know that he should be afraid of the ocean too if he ever escapes the book. You're teaching him things. Yuji grunted. With a grin, Seiichi reclaimed the brush. You promise you won't ever tell Mom or anyone else about the book? Ever? I promise. Yuji always had to promise whenever Niken brought the book out. It was their big secret. Yuji wasn't even sure Dad knew about the genie book, and Dad usually knew everything about Seiichi. Niken dipped the brush into the ink, brushed the excess off on the inside of the bottle's opening, and scrawled out the familiar phrase "and what do you think?" on the top of the page. Words appeared, lots of words. The characters were mostly kanji, but Niken would help Yuji figure them out. Hello again, Seiichi-kun. I am glad to hear from you. I am glad that the Kekkei Genkai is obeying you better now. Keep working at it. We will begin lessons on how to make the beast sit soon. I need to find a special necklace for you. It will make things easier. It will take some doing to capture it though. It is guarded by a fierce warrior woman and said to be cursed. Wow, whispered Yuji, glancing up at his brother. Genie-san is going to teach you magic? A special technique? Would Dad know it? No, it's something only I can do. Yuji's eyes widened. Seiichi could do a couple things that Dad couldn't, like making trees obey him. Seiichi Naiken was so cool. And you get a cursed necklace. How is Genie-san going to get it for you? With his magic, of course. It is interesting to hear that Yuji-kun is afraid of the ocean. Kushina-chan never said anything like that, but she received it later on and didn't spend much time near the water. Who's Kushina-chan? Genie-san mentioned her every once in a while. She's a kid like you. Genie-san talked to her too. He doesn't now. How come? Because we've got the book. That made sense. Yuji-kun is very brave to want to go out fishing despite this fear. I would tell him to wait until he is a little older though. 5 is very grown up, but 10 is even more grown up. A boy with 10 years will catch an even bigger fish even more easily. It will be more impressive if he waits. Patience is rewarding. He will be 6 soon. And then 7. And then 8. And then 9. And then 10. Yuji grinned. Have you been to the city recently? Will you go for the festival? Maybe they will have lots of fireworks. I know your village has festivals for your temple and you have fireworks then, but the city can afford bigger ones. Tell your father to take you. Take very good care of your brother, Seiichi. The city can be big and frightening. It is easy to get lost or disappear. But there are many things to see. So many different people, with skins whiter than Seiichi's and golden or red hair or skins darker brown than even your mother's with clear black hair. Sometimes they have their hair in thousands of tiny braids. You might find a person with green or blue eyes. Maybe even a person with purple or red eyes if you look very hard. Yuji couldn't imagine this. His mother was one of the strangest looking people in their village with her curly brown black hair cropped near her scalp. Only old Ramon-san looked weirder with his dreadlocks, but even she had brown eyes. Everyone had brown eyes. Kins were not amber, no matter how much he insisted they were. And everyone had brown or black hair. For real? Someone can have yellow hair? Naiken burst out laughing for some reason. Yes, Yuji, people can have blonde hair. What's so funny? Naiken just shook his head and turned back to Genie-san's words. Yuji-kun, I hope you are working hard at your secret training and keeping it secret. Seiichi-kun tells me that you have learned all of the hand seals already. Keep practicing them. See how quickly you can run through the sequences your father will teach you. The faster you are, the better. Kushina-chan used to run through every sequence 6 times as fast as she could on the way to school. She was very strong. You must tell me of anything interesting that happens. Work hard, both of you. Seiichi re-wetted his brush and wrote the closing sequence that made the words disappear as though they had never been there. Did you want me to write something for you? Yuji took a deep breath in preparation for all the words he had stored up. Hiruzen strolled through the village, its restive peace filling him with a temporary haze of contentment. It was always good to be able to communicate with Tenzo-kun and Naruto-kun. With every passing year, Tenzo-kun made it obvious that Naruto-kun took after his mother more in mannerisms despite how closely his looks had matched his father's. From the sound of things, Naruto-kun and Tenzo-kun were being well taught by Takashi-kun. Hiruzen had to wonder if Takashi-kun would be willing to drop out of ANBU for a time upon returning to take on a genin team. The agent was old enough, after all. If he was not going to have children and pass on his line that way, then it would be best to give him official students. There were other established bachelors and bachelorettes that had contributed to the village in this way when they had shown themselves reluctant to settle down. And wonder of wonders, some of them had miraculously settled down in truth in the course of mentoring. The restive quality of the street notched up. Malevolence, awe, and determined ignorance met Hiruzen as he glanced around at others walking the thoroughfare. He knew this pattern well. He turned around and smiled at the Uchiha approaching him. The Uchiha was shorter than expected, but then, Itachi-kun had yet to reach his growth spurt. He looked haunted, but the boy always did when he returned from a mission where he had had to fight, which was most missions. Kyumo hadn't taken Konoha's deliberately shoddy peace offering well those 2 years ago. Skirmishes had continued along the eastern edges of the northern border, often quite bloody. Even an 11-year-old that had just been promoted to Chunin for his efficiency despite his pacifistic nature could not be spared. Hokage-sama, Itachi-kun said, bowing shortly to him, which only made those determinedly ignoring the Uchiha frown more deeply. Itachi-kun, your timing is fortunate. I'm heading to your house. Would you accompany me? Of course, Hokage-sama. Itachi-kun fell into step beside him. Was all well in the village while I was away? As well as could be expected with your absence. Your brother was quite lonely. The beginning of a smile curved the boy's lips. There were no incidents at the compound, though? Hiruzen shook his head. No real vandalism other than more graffiti with the usual slurs near the gates. I am sorry I cannot keep the incidents from occurring entirely. Sparing ninja to prevent the petty strikes is a bit of a waste. Hiruzen smiled. Yes, this boy was the genius he had been named. If not for the blatant mistrust the village held towards the Uchiha, the boy would have been a clear candidate for Hokage along with Uchiha Shirosui, though the latter was more of a fighter than a thinker or a planner. Was the unrest concerning my father's position within the military police settled? Hiruzen sighed. For now, yes. This isn't the first time they have struck at him, though this is the most determined of the attempts, save the one that occurred nearly 6 years ago. The hatred was at its freshest then. You do believe us, Hokage-sama? Itachi-kun whispered, staring straight ahead, ignoring the poison directed at him. I believe in Clan Uchiha to the best of my ability. It is difficult when no one has been able to get a satisfactory alibi out of your parents, or many of the other adult Uchiha as to where they were on that night. My belief means nearly nothing though, Itachi-kun. You must find proof, as I have advised your whole clan. If they were indeed delving into clan business they cannot speak of during a meeting at a location they will not honestly name. Itachi-kun frowned and dropped his gaze. Do not lose hope. Your father has invited me to your home today. Perhaps he has found a lead. More like mother did, Itachi muttered. He can't leave the village, as MP head. Yes, most likely your mother did, but she is too discreet to brag. When they at last sat around Uchiha Fugaku and Mikoto's coffee table, cups of tea at hand, Fugaku leaned closer, Mikoto sitting demurely to his left. There are rumors that an organization that belongs to no village is hunting the beasts. I assume you are speaking of Akatsuki, said Hiruzen, who had heard about it from Jiraiya the moment Orochimaru had begun having dealings with them. Fugaku nodded. Clan members have picked up rumors that while they work commissions like any village operative, they have quietly been investigating certain people, tracking down certain powers amongst certain villages. For example, Akatsuki seemed very interested in the Yondaime Mizukage. Yagura had been the Sanbai's Jinchuriki until his disappearance. Interesting. Continue your research. Do not forget that finding parties interested in the Bijou is not enough. You must prove their link to the Kyuubi's attack. I am counting on the Uchiha. Uchiha Mikoto watched Hiruzen with her fathomless dark eyes as her husband bowed his head before following suit. Mei curled up on her futon as the back door shut quietly behind the two ninjas she shared this mission with and her son. She hadn't expected him to become her son. She knew that her child had been a girl and probably would have become a girl just like herself, born to a prostitute, born into prostitution, with no thoughts of what else in life there might be, other than perhaps a higher class of prostitution. Mamoru, she knew that wasn't his real name, but for her, it was, had taken her away from all that and had given her Yuji, who couldn't have been more than a week old. Yuji had adored her, so she had adored him in turn, keeping to whatever orders Mamoru issued without protest as Seiichi watched her warily. Those two had warmed up to her more slowly, glacially slowly. She hadn't realized why until Yuji had been weaned. You're done now, Mamoru had told her. She had violently refused, and Yuji had backed her in his small way. That was the one argument she had won against Mamoru that counted. Every day that she woke up to see Yuji at the breakfast table was a victory so sweet she could take that Mamoru kept her on a short leash and kept many things from her with Seiichi. She knew Yuji's hair wasn't really curly brown, similar to the way the illusion made hers, and that his eyes weren't that color either. She had seen the illusion flicker when Mamoru had been laid up with the flu a couple years ago. She had been bouncing Yuji on her knee when suddenly his eyes had faded to blue, his hair had receded to a golden buzz cut, and his features had sharpened. Upstairs, she had heard Mamoru emptying his stomach into the toilet. The toilet had flushed, and Yuji had returned to normal. So yes, she knew that they were hiding Yuji. For how long, she wasn't sure, but this was the first year she had felt the cloud of their separation truly hanging over her. She had caught Mamoru studying Yuji objectively and trading looks with Seiichi. Late-night training sessions had been stepped up. How long would she have her baby yet? Where would they take him when they took him from her? Would she ever see him again? What would happen to her when Yuji was no longer there to protect her, to keep her near him. Mamoru refused to answer her questions. They had promised her money, and she had gotten it. It was in an account. Every 6 months, she would go to the nearby city and check the balance, and it was always steady, slowly gathering interest. She had once wanted that money to break from her lowest rung on the prostitution ladder, to scale the ladder to the top, to even break away completely and train as a geisha, to have some ability to choose whom she lay with, to be desired for something other than how much cleavage she showed. Now. She pressed the heels of her palms into her eyes, flashes of color playing behind her eyelids. Uncertainty ran chilled fingers over her stomach and intestines despite how she curled up in a ball to ward off the cold. Her eyes prickled and stung as her breathing became jagged and heavy. She would not cry. Not now, not when she hadn't cried when losing her own child to the beating. No, she was a born whore. She did not cry. When Mamoru came in, sliding the door open and shut nearly silently, she was still curled in a ball, struggling to be still, be silent. She expected him to go to his own futon, to rush into sleep's embrace, but he paused. Hiromi? She stayed still. He padded to her side and pulled the blanket free of her face, following with her hands. Hiromi. He clasped her hands in his for a moment before tracing the curve of her jaw with a calloused finger. He chucked diamond-shaped knives with his finger and his thumb. She had seen him once. He had called them kunai. She didn't respond to his touch. Hiromi, what is it? His palm rested against her cheek, warm. Is it Yuji? Mei gave up on feigning sleep. Mamoru was as excellent an actor as he was at picking out body language. What's going to happen? When is this going to end? He sighed and caressed one of her palms for the benefit of their non-existent audience. Mei had learned on the first day that Mamoru never stopped acting, never broke character. I can't tell you. Because you aren't allowed to or because you don't know? Both. I'm right though, aren't I? Yuji is going to go away. He wrote yes on her palm. It tickled, but the sensation didn't block out the spike of pain/terror/uncertainty/fierce denial. And what's going to happen to us? Where will you go? Back. Where? He started writing home but paused. He crossed out the character and wrote back again instead. Because you have to or because you want to? She whispered. Job, family graves, and comrades got traced onto her palm. She considered this. Mamoru was a ninja, she was fairly sure. Probably a Konoha ninja, so that meant he would go back to Konoha. And Seiichi? Same. And me? Wherever you want. Whatever you want. She sat up and took his palm now, locking eyes with him. He was a primal creature, eyes full of roiling and unknowable purpose when he wasn't guarded enough. He would always be her image of what a ninja was. And she wanted to have that example close. What if what I want is to go with you? But she knew better than to say that. Besides, there were other more pressing questions. And will I be alive? He didn't even blink at the words she had written on his palm. I promise. Suspicion weighed heavily in her gut. Will I remember? He didn't give anything away, a superb actor, but she knew that he was lying when he wrote yes on her palm. If I don't remember you, she shook her head, her eyes stinging again, so she pulled her palms free to press against the lids. He always lied to her, so it wasn't the dishonesty that burned, she supposed. It was that he had let her see that he lied somehow. He hadn't even spared her the reassurance that believing in his lie would grant her. He locked his hands around her wrists, and pulled her hands away from her face for the second time. After trapping both in one grip, he put his other hand on the back of her neck and drew her closer, pressing his lips against hers. It was the mask though, so she didn't want any of it. Mamoru kissed Hiromi, not Mei. Yuji loved Mei. Seiichi was fond of Mei. But Mamoru only played husband for Hiromi, never for Mei. Instead of accepting kisses meant for an imaginary woman, Mei pressed her lips to the side of his neck instead, breathing in his scent. His unruly stubble prickled against her cheek and then her neck as he mimicked her gesture. I'm shaving you tomorrow, she whispered before pulling away. His eyes were full of the veneer of calm covering showy worry. Totally in character again. I did promise. She pulled the mask of Hiromi back on and leaned forward to capture his lips. He responded nicely, he always did, but the meaning behind his motion only touched her skin, nothing deeper. Disgust led her to fumbling her roll and pulling away a little too briskly. Shit. She didn't want him to know how he bothered her. Good night, she whispered, burrowing back under her blankets. Mamoru watched her snuggle back under the covers. She had been particularly unsubtle. interesting, and a little bit sad. Hiromi was a good actress, to a point. She blended too much of herself in when she dealt with Yuji and Seiichi. Her love for those two was sincere and deeper than she probably meant it to be. Mei came through for them. For him, she managed a little better to keep her character and self separate. She would occasionally lapse, as she had tonight. Mei had come through strongly in her fear and her questions, but that was to be expected, he supposed. Mamoru was just glad he had somehow managed to trigger her back into Hiromi, whom he could act alongside. Takashi wanted nothing to do with Mei the prostitute, but Mamoru could love Hiromi. If she was as concerned as she had let on, he was going to have to do something. She was attached enough to Naruto-kun that she would act irrationally if he tried to take him away from her again. Last time, he had let her stay because, honestly, her presence made their act that much better. For her to suddenly disappear would raise questions, which he would have to avoid by moving the entire operation. Her love for Naruto-kun was strong enough that he wasn't sure a memory block would cut it. To be safe, he would have had to kill her. He hadn't been ready then, though. Hiromi had been a wonderful mother to both boys, created a stable home life that somehow swept the mission under the rug, and had been a good enough wife to Mamoru that Takashi had let it pass. It had been easier when Mei the whore had just been doing this for the money. That type of loyalty was sketchy but easily dealt with. The deep bonds motivating her now were much more difficult. He had promised her life, though. Hopefully, she would accept the memory block so it wouldn't be necessary for him to break that vow to her. Hiromi wielded the blade competently, scraping it along Mamoru's jawline. In the city, the last time they had made the journey, she had seen the usual safe razors made with porcelain, metal, and wood since plastic was so precious and difficult to produce in this day and age. She had been tempted to nab a few for herself, to make it easier to keep her legs clean, but then she wouldn't have an excuse to touch Mamoru. After stropping the blade for the last time, she cleaned up the other side of his jawline, flicking her eyes over his neck and lifting his chin to ensure that Shadow hadn't hidden anything from her. She handed over the bottle of aftershave as she wiped the blade clean and stowed it before nabbing her scissors off the kitchen table. The boys were out again, off doing whatever Yuji and Seiichi considered worthy of a Sunday morning after a long training session the night before. Taking the whetstone in hand, she touched up the edge of her scissors before pestering Mamoru into sitting down again. "Your hair is a mess." "It seems it always is." She smiled slightly as she set aside her scissors and made him tip his chair back as well as his head so his hair was under the kitchen sink's tap for the most part. She turned the water on warm and worked water into the hair that the spout missed. He lay back, eyes closed, and let her do as she liked. Afterwards, as she patiently combed his hair into the proper part and made it lie flat, she wondered who would do this for him when he returned to wherever he was from. Did he have someone there he liked? Was that why he never looked at her, never turned to her for any sort of release? What was his real name? She supposed she would never know. The activity she normally enjoyed so much because it was the one time she felt close to Mamoru suddenly became a torment because she really didn't know him at all. When she finished, she stepped back and helped him brush the clippings off his back once he stood up. "I'll clean up," he said, heading for the broom. "And it's my turn to cook tonight. What have we got?" She wrinkled her nose. Cod. This endless parade of fish grated upon her. She wanted some real red meat, damn it. He smiled wryly at her disgust. "If you want, you could take Seiichi and head to the herder's village up the track. Grab some salted pork, or whatever from their stores. He'll be glad for the outing. I'll keep Yuji amused." "Do you know where they are?" He began sweeping. "Down on the docks, probably. Breathe through your mouth so you don't offend anyone with your sweet expression." She gave him the finger before slinging on her coat and heading out the door, his eyes probably crinkled with amusement behind her. Mamoru felt as though that time Hiromi cut his hair had been a turning point, years later. What had once been a truce of sorts became distance. It was gradual and so subtle he didn't realize how much had changed until he fingered his hair, which was currently brushing his shoulders, and turned to Hiromi. "Will you cut it?" "My hair?" "Oh, sure. Go have a shower, and I'll do it when you get out." And he froze, realization hitting him all at once. This was odd. She had always started from scratch before, wetting his hair herself. She had always nagged him about his stubble and his hair, but he had been the last one to shave himself. Yet, she was the one coaching Seiichi on shaving. In fact, Mamoru had been slowly taking over simply because more and more she neglected to harass him into letting her do it. It had been a sign of their closeness. That she was being cavalier about it. "Hiromi." She turned to him fully now, the rough cotton of her dull pants and shirt strange when he compared it to the image of her, as she had been at their first meeting. Almost 8 years now. She had to be what, 28, 29? The beginnings of lines were collecting in the corners of her eyes and around her mouth, visible through the hinge he kept on her. Laugh lines, fortunately. Her hair was cropped close to her skull, impossibly curly. Her hair had been longer then, and she had worn a deep blue velvet dress and too much makeup. How old are you? She flinched, her eyes darting away from him. If I answer, will you tell me the same? A true answer? He considered before nodding. I'm almost 26. 17. She had been 17, nearly 18, the same age Seiichi was now. He felt he should have known that surely the information had been provided on that long-forgotten mission scroll. And you? He glanced away now. 35. She smiled slightly. You don't look it, if that reassures you at all. People don't ask how Seiichi can be your son, but I always wonder why. He wished he could say the same truthfully, but she looked haggard for 25. Living on the coast didn't agree with her, but then, her previous lifestyle hadn't either if it hadn't struck him just how young she had been. You look far too wise for 25. She laughed, but it was bitter. I've always wondered why no one asked too many questions about me. Even if I look 30, Seiichi's too old to be mine. Thanks for being nicer than them about it though, I guess. Go have your shower now. I have to sharpen my scissors. Has she been acting oddly? Seiichi ducked under Mamoru's kick as Yuji did sit-ups with his knees curled over a low branch at the edge of their well-established clearing. You've noticed. Mamoru did not look amused as he blocked Seiichi's retaliatory strike. It's been slow, but she's pulling away from us except for Yuji. She won't ruffle my hair anymore. You're almost a grown man now, Mamoru pointed out. It would be odd. Seiichi shrugged. It's little things like that with me. Things that, as you say, can be passed off as a mother letting go of a grown-up son. With you, it's a little more obvious. Well, there was always some distance between you two, but the gap has increased. When I go with her to get pork or beef up the track, she flirts with a couple men these days. She didn't used to. Seiichi could tell that Mamoru was torn between relief that Hiromi would be easier to cast off when their mission ended and worry at how ties were only weakening on certain fronts. He was tempted to roll his eyes. Dad could be pretty dumb. Mamoru forcefully reminded Seiichi that he was only dumb in one area by creaming him in hand-to-hand combat and combat with mild jutsu before gently sparring against Yuji, correcting his stances without fail and taking blows without wincing that Yuji still didn't understand he was supposed to pull. Seiichi found himself grinning at his father unabashedly as Yuji reluctantly went through a battle at half speed with Mamoru so he could illustrate how to react properly to blows. His little brother was getting better. Seiichi had had very little contact with academy students, having only attended for a month before blasting through graduation and genin rank to chunin, but he had the feeling that Yuji knew more about combat than he would have if he had been attending the village's school. By the end of the half-speed spar, Yuji was on his butt, panting and scowling. Dad! No fair. You thought slow motion would give you a better chance? Of course. You win because you're faster than me. I win because I know the dance better than you do. We spar to make you memorize the dance. Now go throw kunai and shuriken with your brother. I have hand seals to practice. Seiichi obliged Yuji by having him throw many kunai, focusing on improving his brother's accuracy and precision. Once Yuji was well on his way, Seiichi sidled over to father. Sarutobi-sama wrote to me this morning, he whispered as Mamoru ran through the seals for what seemed to be an earth-style jutsu at half speed. And? He asks after Yuji's progress. Jiraiya-sama has been pressing for permission to see his godson. At the very least, he would like our location so Jiraiya-sama can visit us and get Yuji used to his presence. Mamoru watched Yuji chuck shuriken for a moment. He's not quite ready, he admitted. His skills are progressing, but he's not strong enough to fend for himself should Jiraiya-sama need to leave him behind to pursue his work. He doesn't know how to operate on his own. He's always with you or me, for good reason. His knowledge is also lacking, Seiichi whispered. He knows nothing of the village structure and international politics. Mamoru nodded. Deliberate. A child's ability to keep his mouth shut is always in question. Even with you and me watching him, there was only so much we could do to curb him in public. Keeping him from showing off the results of his training was nearly impossible, if you recall. He is, unfortunately, something of a braggart. That usually stems from insecurity. Competing with you shouldn't have been an issue, Mamoru mused, his eyes narrowed. You are much older. Hiromi coddles him compared to you. In terms of responsibility, perhaps. Children his age are often trusted with errands to perform on their own, so I've seen. He has never once been without you or me. True. Hiromi's unstable position might also be worrying him. He's aware of it on some level. Seiichi nodded. He's also feeling left out because your job is not out at sea, as most of his friends' father's jobs are. That you work in the village means that his friends can brag about their knowledge of knots and rigging, while he can say little in return. The son of a mechanic having little to say. Yes, that's true too. He learns the ninja trade, but he cannot speak of it. So he compensates by bragging about other things to gain attention. Seiichi glanced up at the patch of sky visible between the birch and maple boughs, which had gone from a dusky pink and orange to blue. Soon there would be too little light to throw kunai safely and night training would begin. Should I tell Sarutobi-sama to have Jiraiya-sama visit? His father nodded. Jiraiya-sama will need to see for himself that Yuji isn't ready. He can also update us on the situation. The lack of activity here is both reassuring and worrying. Have they found us? Are they just biding their time? If so, why? We are bound here, so we cannot begin to seek out the answers. Jiraiya-sama must not leave a trail to us though. Be sure you specify this in your reply. And what are we going to do about Mother? Mamoru raised an eyebrow. Do? Seiichi was tempted to bury his face in his palms as his father walked over to Yuji, and informed him that night exercises such as tree climbing by feel and moving silently through the underbrush were about to begin. It was one thing to be reserved, as he had to be with the village girls, but it was another to be obtuse about your own wife. Uchiha Mikoto looked over her notes, and sighed. Akatsuki was subtle. There was no solid proof of any contact with Konoha other than through Orochimaru, though their members took opportunities to quietly track down Jinchuriki in other villages or out in the countryside, since a few carriers had somehow managed to slip away from their villages. Nothing in fire, though. The very avoidance stank. Mother. She glanced over at Itachi, who had just gotten out of the bath. He liked to soak for about an hour after returning from a mission, no matter how pruny he came out looking. Any luck? She shook her head. They are laying low, I suppose. I cannot tell you why, no more than I can tell you why they are hunting Bijou but not engaging them, just tracking them. Itachi looked disheartened, glancing down at his hands as he settled beside her at the table. Father is angry, quietly. You know why. Getting into ANBU would have been perfect for his plans, but the prejudice has been blocking your entrance for 2 years now. He's getting impatient. We are hemmed in on all sides. Even Hokage-sama only offers us the chance to clear our name, not to ascend higher. Itachi shook his head. He kept me after debriefing today. Mikoto turned to her son now. This sounded more important than her notes. He talked about promoting me to Jounin, but first he wanted to see if I was interested in interning in admin. In what capacity? Itachi shifted slightly, betraying nerves. He wanted me to work as his unofficial assistant. Mikoto reached over and squeezed the 12-year-old's hand. And? I told him I wanted to discuss it with you. She smiled. So let's discuss. You've been a chunin for over 2 years now. You are very competent in the field, but I know you hate it. Do you know what it might mean, that Hokage-sama has offered this to you? Itachi's dark eyes met her own. It could be seen as either an honor or as a leash. True, but publicly it will be seen as an honor. You will be exposed to protocol, to village politics, and to fire politics. You will meet many influential people. Both Orochimaru and Yandame-sama served in this way for a time, as did Sandaime-sama for Naidame-sama. Itachi's eyes closed now as he nodded. Oh. You see now? This is the reward he dangles before you. He sees you as trustworthy despite your connection to the clan, despite what he suspects us of. He must see you as somewhat removed from whatever plot we are hatching. And what if it is a leash in disguise? He asked, frowning. What if Father decides to use this position the same way he wanted to use my position in ANBU? He will, and it is. She cupped his cheeks and used her thumbs to lift the corners of his lips. You are wise though, despite your age. I think Hokage-sama knows what the clan is rumbling for. I think he wants you to prove yourself to him as the bridge between bloodshed and peace. And what would you do in my place? Mikoto glanced out the window as she mulled over the possibilities. What your father wants, what the rest of the clan wants, it is short-sighted. Itachi nodded. War won't give us anything we want, just pain. The stark belief in his words shone in his eyes. Mikoto was less of a pacifist. War is about destruction. Taking out Konoha will destabilize the balance of the 5 nations. While we are fighting here, the other 4 villages will be circling, along with a few of the stronger minor villages. After razing Konoha to the ground, will we be strong enough to uphold Konoha's position in fire? I doubt it. It is a foolish idea. The skirmishes on our border, what good do they accomplish other than to fuel tension? Suna and Iwai us hungrily while our gaze is on Kumo. No, there are quieter ways to achieve the respect we want without prostrating ourselves before Sarutobi-sama, slobbering over his mercy while frantically searching for proof that Kyubi was not our doing. I would take the position to learn. Learn whether Sarutobi-sama truly wishes you to be in line for Hokage. Learn who the real successor will be and find out whether he shares Sarutobi-sama's preference for you. Real successor? I guess I am too young to be ready before Saname-sama will want to retire. Exactly. He probably has someone else in mind. I suspect Jiraiya-sama, but he has turned Hokage-sama down before. Will you find out who the other option is? Itachi nodded solemnly as Sasuke burst in the door, back from another grueling day at the academy if his complaints to his brother were accurate. Mikoto and Itachi shared a secret smile, one that spoke of fondness for Sasuke and an unspoken pact. Yuji returned home from yet another day running around the docks with his friends under his brother's watchful eye to find a stranger in their kitchen seated at their table. Mom looked nervous, but Dad looked happy, jovial almost. Yuji, Seiichi, come in and close the door, he said, beckoning them to take seats at the table. We're back, Yuji mumbled belatedly, eyeing the stranger as he shuffled over to wrap an arm around Mom's waist as she whispered, welcome back. This is my uncle Atsushi. He has finally found time in his busy schedule to visit us, said Dad as Seiichi settled into the chair beside him and shook Great Uncle Atsushi's hand across the table with an easy grin. Mom ruffled Yuji's hair before pushing him forward. Go say hello? Yuji took a deep breath before trotting over and bowing shortly. Hi. The white-haired uncle offered his hand. Yuji cautiously shook it. Atsushi Ajisen looked happy enough, but his eyes were glimmering with tears. Hello, Yuji-kun. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've been meaning to for a long time. Hiromi struggled to remain outwardly happy at those words, but internally, she was panicking. Waiting, huh? That rang too true despite all the lies Mamura had been spouting since this Uncle Atsushi had arrived at their door with a genial chuckle and a lewd compliment for her. The focus was entirely on Yuji, having Yuji meet this uncle. Mei was dead certain that this was no accident. Yuji, did you collect many muscles today? She asked quickly, inserting herself into the conversation before Yuji or Atsushi could begin to talk about why they needed to meet. Yuji turned his sunny smile on her, and she breathed a little easier. Yeah, me and Tori filled 3 pails. Arita wasn't as fast. We helped him fill his second one. Hoshijiji gave us 80 raya for our buckets. That's 20 a pail, she said with a frown. Last time he gave you 25. Yuji shrugged. He said he had some already, so he didn't need them as much. He's heading to the city tomorrow, so I'll be able to get more for the pails when he comes back. I brought some home for us. Niken and me washed them outside. Do you want them for supper? She asked the table at large. I'll cook them, Mamura said, getting up. Hiromi, sit down. They're drying outside? Seiichi nodded, and Mamura slipped out the door to collect them. Hiromi took his seat and fought not to cringe or react like the horse she had been at Atsushi's leer. She had the feeling he knew who she had been and that he knew her kind well despite his age. So, Atsushi-san, what is it that keeps you on the road? I'm a traveling writer. Wandering brings me new inspiration, so I always keep on the road. I can't keep my editors waiting for my next manuscript for too long. It must be hard to edit, she said, what with the collaboration required between you and your editor. I imagine you're stuck in one place then. Yes, usually. Sometimes I manage to set up forwarding for the notes my editor sends me because I can't sit still any longer. The time when I'm writing is the best for travel though. What about book signing? Promotional tours? He appraised her from behind his smile. I don't do book tours. I write under a pen name. We use my identity as a selling point, a mystery for fans to debate. Interesting. Seiichi was watching her carefully, worried. She smiled to reassure him, and he cracked a weak grin in return. Obviously, he wasn't keen on her cutting questions for their guest. Can we speak frankly? Atsushi asked her, glancing at Seiichi, who was silently balking. Let's, said Hiromi. I'm glad you stayed here with him. I was told you would be done once he was weaned, and that would be that, but I'm glad. His mother would have been pleased. She was so eager to meet him, to teach him her ways. She wanted him to not be like the others that had mocked her dream to be the village leader. She believed women should be able to do whatever they wanted. If he didn't have you, I don't think he would have had the opportunity to understand that. Hiromi stared. Yuji's real mother, whoever she was, had apparently been strong, someone who was maybe a ninja, interested in being a kaige? Had she succeeded? Was that why Yuji was being hidden? Because his mother was dead, would her enemies come after Yuji? What are you talking about? Yuji said, glancing between the three of them with a scowl as Mamoru came back inside. A glance passed between Atsushi and Mamoru, who shrugged and sighed. Mamoru set the bowl of mussels on the counter and stood behind Yuji's chair, placing hands on his narrow shoulders. Yuji, we're going to tell you parts of a big secret. I need you to be mature about it. That means no crying, no screaming, no running away, and no getting angry. You need to stop and think, like I've been teaching you. Like a warrior, Yuji said, craning his neck to stare up at his father. Exactly. Now gather your calm and listen quietly. We are going to tell you some of what is and cannot be changed. Not everything, because that must be earned with your progress. Beside her, Seiichi ran through a series of hand motions under the table. Nothing happened except a chill ran down Hiromi's spine. No one should be able to hear, Seiichi said. Atsushi and Mamoru nodded their thanks. First, Yuji, Atsushi-san is your godfather. Mei trembled with terror. So this was the man they were raising Yuji for. Your mother and father appointed him to take care of you if anything happened to them, but he has many jobs other than writing that made this impossible. Mother and father? Yuji whispered. Your mother and I are not your birth parents, though we love you as if you were our own, never fear. Mamoru gave Yuji some time to absorb this, carefully appraising the boy's expression. Hiromi couldn't take the panic that was creeping in, so she reached across the table and clasped his hand. Yuji, you are my son. Don't worry. Even if I didn't bear you, you are my son, always. The eyes that met hers were filled with incomprehension. Yuji, I have always known. This changes nothing for me. You are my son. Am I still your mother? She tried to keep her voice steady throughout her question, but it broke on the object. Yuji stared at her for a chilling moment before squeezing her hand back. Yeah, he whispered. He turned back to Mamoru. And you're still dad. I am honored. What about Niken? Yuji's eyes sought Seiichi's now. We share no blood, but you are still my little brother, Yuji, Seiichi promised. Still a brat. But are you mom and dad's real son? Seiichi shook his head. No. I am like you that way. Yuji just breathed for a while after nodding. The table must have been intriguing given how intently he was studying it. You are doing well, Mamoru said, squeezing his shoulders. Your calm is good. Nothing horrible has been said yet. We are still family even if we aren't related by blood. And your godfather is here for you now. Who were my blood parents? Yuji whispered. I cannot tell you their names yet, Mamoru said, carefully not looking at Hiromi. She could tell that her presence was the only reason this simple information was not being handed over. It made her furious. I'm not going to betray him, she hissed, glaring at Mamoru. He's my precious son. If you're so finicky, I'll plug my ears and hum. Now Mamoru met her gaze, appraising her. She could see the contempt that characterized the man behind the veil of Mamoru peering out at her. Her glare deepened. Hey now, said Atsushi, waving an arm between them. There's no need for this. Hiromi-chan, I'm sure you're trustworthy. Mamoru-kun knows that or he wouldn't have let you stay for so long. Right. The man pretending to be Mamoru studied her despite the attempted interruption. The contempt faded slightly, but somehow Mei understood that this wasn't the mask of Mamoru being snapped back into place. No, whoever this man was had softened towards her slightly. I trust in her moral fiber when it comes to Yuji. That much I can say without reservation. However, the more knowledge you hold, the more dangerous it is for you, Mei. She flinched. He had never called her that name since they had walked out of that sweets shop all those years ago together. She had always been Hiromi. Dangerous how, sir? She asked. The dangers you have been watching for have not appeared in all these years. Your paranoia has not been rewarded. The danger exists, Atsushi insisted. What is going on isn't exactly known, but whoever went after his mother wasn't caught. I've been hunting alongside others for years. Nothing solid. My master suspects someone, but we cannot find him or proof. Do you want me to leave the room? She asked, keeping her gaze on Mamoru. I can go see if my friends at the tea house want some company. Takashi appraised Mei and her offer silently while he felt the tension and fear stiffen Yuji's shoulders beneath his hands. The boy was beginning to figure out just how divided his parents were, and it was scaring him. However, Yuji's fear wasn't the priority here. Secrecy was. That's a good idea, he said. Thank you for offering. She froze as though she hadn't expected him to agree before nodding and slipping the mask of Hiromi back on. Squeezing Yuji's hand one last time and giving him a smile, she pushed back her chair and stalked to the door, nabbing her coat off the hook as she passed. The door shut firmly behind her. Why can't Mom know? Asked Yuji. Because she is not like Seiichi, your godfather, me, or our master. She is not a ninja. She cannot defend these secrets, so it is better to not have her carry them. That is why she cannot know what we are about to tell you. If the people who killed your blood mother come for Hiromi, it is better for her to be ignorant. Doubt was written plain across Yuji's face as he looked up at him, but Takashi didn't allow any uncertainty. This is why we insist on secrecy for your training. If it became known that you were learning to fight, rumors would grow and spread and bring the attention of those who killed your blood mother here to threaten us. You have kept the secret well so far, which is why we haven't been targeted. Mamoru glanced at Jiraiya, who nodded. Even I didn't know where you were being hidden until I was told. Your parents were ninja of Konoha. Ninja Yuji didn't look especially happy. Mamoru could tell that Jiraiya-sama was confused by this lukewarm reaction. No, they were not daring sailors. I apologize. Yuji sighed. Yeah, it kind of sucks. What sort of cool things do ninja do? They don't sail through storms or fight off sharks or hunt whales. Mamoru struggled not to snicker. Jiraiya-sama was gaping. Oh, brat, are you for real? Yuji glanced at him. Yeah. All ninja are just good for killing people. They're fighting some stupid war up north, right? Hoshijiji told me and Tori about it. He hears all sorts of rumors in the city. Jiraiya-sama turned to Mamoru. I'm extremely disappointed in you. How can this child not know how cool ninja are? Seiichi was struggling to keep a straight face. Yuji, when I control the trees, that's a ninja technique. Yuji turned to him. What? Really? Seiichi nodded. It's something the first Hokage could do. Oh, okay then. Your mother was a kunoichi, a female ninja, named Uzumaki Kushina. Your father was Namikaze Minato. Both were jounin rank in the village, which is the highest skill ranking you can achieve. Mamoru was gratified when Yuji looked a little more impressed. What rank are you? I am a jounin as well. Seiichi is a chunin. Atsushi-san is a jounin, but he is part of a renowned group of ninja called the Sannin of Konoha. They are extremely powerful. Your father was his student. What's a chunin? Chunin is the next rank down from jounin. Genin are the lowest. 3 ranks. Huh. Not like on a big ship. There are cabin boys, navigators, hands, lookouts, gun officers, first mates, and captains. Seiichi chuckled. Jiraiya-sama groaned. Mamoru just sighed. Yes, Yuji. Are you going to tell me more? Mamoru considered. You must become a ninja so you can complete the task your father left for you, so you can properly protect our village as a Jinchuriki. You will be leaving us soon with Jiraiya-sama. Your name is. He glanced at Jiraiya-sama. Kid, would you like to hear about your parents? They had some great adventures. Yuji looked a little less than enthusiastic. Maybe later? After supper? Jiraiya-sama looked crushed, so Mamoru stepped in. After supper then. Seiichi, can you go retrieve your mother? Can I go get her too? Yuji pleaded. Mamoru nodded and let Yuji slip out from under his hands and hurtle towards his sandals as Seiichi followed more sedately. After the sound of footsteps on gravel faded, Takashi turned to Jiraiya-sama. He took it very well. He didn't care. Takashi shook his head. Of course not. He's had us as his parents. Expecting him to be hanging on to every word about his previously unknown real parents isn't realistic. He's in shock, just hiding it very well. He's going to need some time. You know him very well. Of course. I've been his father for nearly 8 years. Minato is his father. Jiraiya-sama was scowling. No matter what genjutsu covers his hair and eyes and makes him look a little more like a blend between you and Mei-san, he is Minato's son. Anger flooded Takashi. I've raised him. He's as good as my son. You've protected him and trained him. Takashi slammed fists down on the counter and turned to glare at his superior. And disciplined him. Taught him words and numbers. Read him stories before bed. He exhaled raggedly. Jiraiya-sama looked taken aback, but then understanding and regret appeared. I'm sorry. He has been your son. I never expected you to get so attached. Takashi rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't either. I didn't even know I was until a moment ago. I have watched me clutch him close and make herself his mother, but I never thought I was like her. I thought I had managed to maintain better detachment than that. When you live in a role so long, it begins to creep in and become reality. Jiraiya-sama looked as though he spoke from experience. Your longest mission before this one was 2 years? Takashi nodded. When I was 23. It was strange to go home. It hurt to leave some of the friends I made in my cover role. This is far more intense though. Of course it is. The Sannin sighed. I can't take him yet. He's not ready. No, Takashi agreed, he's not. I'll teach him what I can about politics and current events, but serious teaching isn't really my thing. Besides, I've got to keep on top of all the shit the other nations are up to right now. I'll be by when I can, but I can handle the rest. I didn't want to start him too early. He might have blabbed something. Yeah. Again, the Sannin sighed. I'm used to getting them when they're 12. What am I supposed to do with a 7-year-old? Yuji sprinted ahead of Seiichi, determined to be the first one to reach Mom. Everything was off kilter, the ground was bucking beneath his feet, but Mom would make it better. She always did. She wasn't at the tea house. Terror gripped him as the two ladies inside babbled worriedly that no, they hadn't seen his mother since yesterday, not really, unless you counted seeing her walk past through the window. She was heading for the docks, they thought. Yuji sprinted off before they could finish gabbing. Mom was standing out on the longest pier, a dark figure against the gray of the ocean and the sky. She was hugging herself against the early spring chill. Yuji sprinted over the pier's damp planks, ignoring the schooners that would normally have caught his attention. The sound of his footsteps carried over the sound of the wavelets smacking the schooner's hulls and the creaking of taut lines. Mom! She turned after a moment and crouched, opening her arms to him. He slowed a little before slipping into her embrace. He was supposed to be a warrior about this, a ninja, but the ninja had sent his mom away, had upended his world. He was sick of ninja. He let himself bawl because Seiichi was far enough away that he would have time to stop. Hey now, hush, it's okay. It's okay, Yukuen. I'm here. I'm still your mom, no matter what. And you're still my son, no matter what anyone says, okay? Uh-huh. She stroked his hair and rubbed circles on his back as he struggled to calm down. I don't want to be a ninja, he whimpered into her shoulder. I want to be a sailor. I want to be a captain. Oh, Yuji, I'd love to tell you that you can do whatever you want, that you can be whatever you want, but I can't. I don't know what's going to happen. I can't make them let you. But I don't want to. I know, baby, I do. I don't want to leave you. But some things are decided for us. Sometimes we aren't powerful enough to make things go our way no matter how much we cry or plead. The powerful people make the rules. The strong. You and I are not strong enough to make those people listen to us. You're going to leave me? He whispered, terrified. Sure, no, of course not. But you just said. Sure, it's okay. When you're a grown man, of course you're going to leave me. But I'm only 7, he said. And that's why you're not leaving, and neither am I. She pulled back and smiled brightly at him, but there were tears on her cheeks. Mom. Hush. Mom. It's nothing. Did Atsushi-san tell you about your parents? You and Dad are my parents. She smiled again but tapped his nose. That's not very nice to your poor mother and father. I'm sure they very much wanted to be your parents, but they were unable to, so your father and I were lucky enough to get to be. But you should still learn about them. I'm sure your mother spoke to you every day when you were in her tummy. Yuji considered this quietly. How old was I when you met me? A week old. You were so happy to have something other than goat's milk. He wrinkled his nose. But I thought moms only make milk when they've had a baby? That cat did. Mom pursed her lips. I was having a baby, but my baby died. She died before she was born, like that kitten that got strangled by the umbilical cord. Yuji stared at his mom, horrified and uncomprehending. I was so happy that you needed me. I was so happy that I could give you what you needed. Do you light incense for her? Mom shook her head. She didn't have a name and was buried in my old town. She didn't have time to breathe in a soul. She would not have lived a good life, if she had lived. I was very poor and had a pretty bad job before your father brought you to me. Is that why you love Dad? Exactly. Your dad was very kind. But he kicked you out, and you fight all the time. Yes. But he was very kind to let me be your mother. If you split up like Kin's parents, I want to go with you. I don't think you would be allowed to, but I'm glad you'd want to. Mom glanced over his shoulder, and Yuji knew that Seiichi Niken had caught up. Wipe your eyes. We can't let your brother see that you haven't been the perfect warrior. Yuji dragged the back of his hand over his eyelids, smearing the tears into nothingness. Now take my hand, she said as she stood up. Let's go see how your father has fared in the war against your muscles. Yuji leaned back against the tree trunk he was sprawled in front of. He was still warm enough despite only wearing a t-shirt and pants because of the escaping exercises that were part of the night training routine. If he could keep Dad and Seiichi from cornering him for an hour, he won. The best he had managed over the years was half an hour. He was mighty proud of that, all things considered. Seiichi and I crossed his arms and looked down at him with a sigh, a dark shape in the gloom. Yuji could just barely make out his features. You know I can't do that, his brother said, shaking his head. It's damn annoying to never be able to go anywhere without you or Dad. You'll be the scariest thing at the test of courage, with that face of yours. Yuji shot back, sneering. Everyone knows you tail me. People say, oh, how sweet. Look, it's your stalker brother who still lives at home even though he's 23 and should be married to some nice girl by now. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is? Seiichi raised an eyebrow. We're not supposed to leave you alone. I know you're getting competent, but until you can beat Father and me, you aren't strong enough to be on your own. You're much farther along than children at the academy would be since you've been privately tutored since you were 4, but no genin is powerful enough to fend off the people that killed Kushina-sama. But do you two have to follow me around so obviously? Can't you be all sneaky about it? We could, Niken admitted, but it's funnier to watch you get ribbed. You used to follow me everywhere. I'm just paying back the favor. Bastard, Yuji muttered. What a foul mouth you have when Mom's not around. Ha! She's the one that taught me how to swear properly. She knows words even Hoshijiji won't say. Prostitutes learn these things from each other and their clients. Seiichi shook his head. Only you would hero worship her for surviving as a whore. Only Mom could make prostitution cool. Besides, even ninja know how cool prostitutes are. Kunoichi poses as them sometimes during missions. Whores know everything. Seiichi laughed and leaned forward to ruffle Yuji's hair. You're a freaky kid, you know that? You're just jealous that I'm more adaptable than you. Besides, Mom wants to be a geisha, which is epic. The only thing that would be more epic would be if Mom was the captain of a ship. You take being a supportive son to new highs and lows, Yuji. Shut up. Anyway, skipping back to your complaint, I guess for the test of courage I can tell you discreetly or warn Father to do the same. And will you obviously be somewhere else? Yuji pressed, scowling. We'll use a clone, fine. Finally. Geez, this had better become your standard modus operandi. It's getting damn embarrassing to have Dad on my tail. Damn embarrassing, is it? Said a voice right behind Yuji's ear. With a squawk and some flailing, Yuji got turned around to spot Dad crouching with a broad smirk on his face. Goddamn it, Dad, why do you have to be so creepy sometimes? Because you still flail like a civilian. You should have been halfway across the clearing the moment I breathed too close to you. You didn't even draw a kunai. If I had been trying to kill you, you would have been dead before I had spoken. Yuji stuck his tongue out before he turned to frown at his brother, who was doubled over and shaking with mirth. You could have warned me, you douche. I'm going to introduce your mouth to soap, his dad said mildly. You don't threaten Mom with soap. If you keep this up, I will. Usually, she keeps a civil tongue in her head. I'm not even saying any of the really bad words. And if you do, I'm going to scrub your tongue clean of their taint with a steel bristle brush and lye soap. Dad was deadly serious. Yuji gulped. Only street rats should have a vocabulary as bad as your mother's at 12. I'm almost 13. It's August, old man. And Mom was a street rat. Sort of. But you're not. Yandame-sama was more impressive when angry because he didn't start running his mouth. And my blood, Mom? Dad grimaced. Kushina-sama was of a more exuberant temperament. So she swore lots. Yuji grinned. She very much lived up to the stereotype that redheads are hot-headed. Yuji chuckled. See? Both my moms are badass. Dad pinched the bridge of his nose as Seiichi snickered. Mom was dancing to the radio when Seiichi walked into the living room 4 weeks later. The radio was tuned to a pop station, and she was what was it called? Liquid dancing to the beat. Yuji was tucked into the corner of the couch, clapping out the beat with his friend Torai-kun, whose face was a rich blend of fascination and horror. This wasn't unusual. She had done this a bit during their first year together, Seiichi recalled. Her habit had petered out as the months had passed, and she had instead focused on fitting in with the more traditional crowd that called Kirijishi village home. She had started again when Yuji, who had been 9 at the time, had witnessed a group of people around Seiichi's age breakdancing during their traditional summer visit to Southport, which was the biggest city on the south coast of Fire. Mom's status of rad had been assured when she had winked at them and slipped into the group only to start showing off skills she must have picked up during her prostitution days. Dad hadn't been around that day, fortunately, or he might have had something to say about acting one's age. Mom looked older than her years, but she moved like someone much younger. Yuji had pestered her into dancing at home since that demonstration. A techno song faded in as Mom beckoned Yuji off the couch. "Come on, stick in the mud. You're not just going to watch me." She fixed Tori with a glare, but the other boy's eyes widened and he shook his head frantically, waving his hands in front of himself. She grabbed Yuji and forced him to shuffle in sync with her, as Seiichi made himself comfortable against the doorframe. Next to Mom, Yuji looked a little spastic, but he was improving. Seiichi just wasn't sure how this skill would be useful even if Yuji was better at it than Bunshin no Jutsu. Shaking his head with a grin when they switched styles as the next song started, Seiichi pushed off the doorframe and headed into the kitchen to get them glasses of water. Torai-kun was still glued to the couch, looking traumatized by the way Mom was using her hips, when Seiichi got back. Swallowing Snickers, he passed the kid a cup as Yuji kept to moves that required less shaking of his butt. "What's that one called?" Seiichi asked. Yuji shrugged and kept going. "Crank that. Came out the year I got pregnant," Mom said, stepping his way and stealing one of his glasses to chug it down. "Old school, but hey, why not? So what brings you back from work early without your father, boy?" Seiichi snorted. "Dad's finishing up a winch for the runner's crew. He says we're hitting the city this weekend. Runner's captain's gonna take us there as payment." Mom nodded in time with the beat. "Cool. Sounds good." She began to shuffle back out into the middle of the living room. "Atsushi is meeting us there." She missed a beat as Yuji jumped turned to face him. "Really? The old perv's gonna meet us?" Seiichi nodded. "Cool. Mom, maybe he can hit clubs with us since Seiichi and I and Dad are sticks in the mud about it." Mom snorted. "You think they're gonna let someone your age in? Ha! I'll go in under." Seiichi twitched slightly before Yuji could say henge, a warning. Yuji smoothly recovered. "A really big coat and tall boots." "Pfft," crowed Torai-kun, clapping. "You're gonna look like a fool." "But I'll be a dancing fool," Yuji said, crouching slightly and doing that flapping motion with his knees, jerking if Seiichi remembered correctly. Mom groaned at the awful phrase, but there was an edge of fear to it. May sat in the prow, staring out at the waves they were plowing over as the crew of the runner adjusted the sails and shouted nonsense to each other. Yuji was helping them with the lines, ecstatic that he was finally out at sea for real again instead of tacking around the village harbor. Mamoru and Seiichi were in the stern with the captain, discussing who knew what. It had only taken one look at Mamoru this morning as they had loaded their bags into the ship and set sail to know that this was it, the day she had been dreading for more than 12 years now. How would they stop her from going after them? Probably by erasing her memory somehow. If Ninja could make Yuji a curly-haired brunette when he was actually blonde, she had no doubt they could fiddle with her memories of the last 12 years. What would they make her remember instead? Where would they leave her? What goals would they put in her head? Shivering, May tucked her head between her knees and chest. Mamoru shouldered Yuji and Hiromi's bags as Seiichi escorted Hiromi in her search for a grocery store. The pair pushed through the press of the crowds near the huge harbor, heading towards the nearest alley that would take them to the shopping district a little further up the slopes of the long-dead volcano that Southport was built upon. Yuji lugged Mamoru and Seiichi's extra satchels, which were far lighter than the other bags, in Mamoru's wake. They were heading in nearly the opposite direction and sticking with the noisy masses. "Dad, where are we staying this time?" Yuji shouted, tugging on his shirt. "Atsushi booked a suite for us. He said something about a view of the harbor." He checked building numbers as he led the way onto the boulevard at the ritzier end of the waterfront. 192, there it was. Yuji gaped at its 12 floors for a moment before scampering after him. It wasn't the nicest building on the row, but it was swankier than anything Mamoru would normally have dared to walk into without a target waiting on one of the floors. He shook that image out of his head. It had literally been ages since he had been assigned an assassination mission. He wrangled with the receptionist and accepted 3 copies of the keycard before calling Yuji away from poking at the tropical plant growing in the oversized pot. He zipped past the feeble elevator and headed for the stairs, Yuji whining on his heels. 6th floor. God damn it, Dad. Do you know how many steps that is? Why don't you count them as we go? Then you can go on and on and on and. Dad. On about them to your mother. You think you're so funny. And you think you can get away with being this lippy. That's okay, son. I'm sure you'll see the light by the 65th step. I hate you. Mamoru grinned. Yuji wasn't panting by that 65th step, but he was breathing a tiny bit harder than normal. Mamoru felt appeased as he snicked his keycard in and out of the door handle. There was a beep, and he twisted the handle and pushed the door open. Yuji whistled brokenly as he shuffled in around him as Mamoru held the heavy door open for him. That's a cool view. That it is, called a voice from the living room. Mamoru set the bags down in the foyer and headed into the living room to bow deeply before the couch, where the old Sannin was seated. Jiraiya-sama, thank you for seeing to our comfort this way. Head up, Takashi-kun. Even that Kakashi kid doesn't bow that way to me anymore, and he used to be more hung up on protocol than anyone else. Mamoru raised his head. I am the Hokage's hand, Jiraiya-sama. Dad? Yuji looked a little nonplussed. Did the old perv just call you Takashi? Jiraiya-sama growled at his son's less than polite nickname for him and waved the boy to take a seat. Your father took on a name for the mission, just as your mother and your brother did. It's not safe to use your real name for undercover missions. We did the same for you. Yeah, I know my blood mom and dad named me Naruto. I just didn't think that Dad and Seiichi what's mom's real name? Mei. Huh. What about Niken? Mamoru took over for this one. He was codenamed Tenzu when I first met him just before we left the village with you. His real name is classified, as is his life outside of ANBU. Unlike most agents, he doesn't have a village persona. Yuji's brow wrinkled with confusion. But your name really is Takashi. I was given the name by my parents, yes? It is what I am commonly known in Konoha as. Why wouldn't Niken? Mamoru shook his head. I wasn't told. My understanding is that there are special circumstances surrounding his childhood, similar to you. He was sent with me to be your brother so that he would acclimatize to normal civilian interactions between family and friends. You've done a good job showing him how to be a brother. Yuji looked awed and a little sad. So it was all for me? You guys wouldn't have been family without me? Mamoru got up and ruffled the boy's hair. You are very rude to say so. Acting as though you are the center of our world. TCH. A frail smile replaced the forlorn expression on his son's face. I'm gonna go claim a room, okay? You do that. Take that ton you call a bag in with you. We'll be here for a week, but don't get too comfortable. We might have to move on the fly, I know, Yuji said as he rolled his eyes and walked away to peer in every room. Because we're not at home anymore, there's no telling how many ninja are around every corner. Blah blah blah. Don't take this lightly, brat, said Jiraiya-sama. Southport is the biggest port in fire. That used to be Eastport, but it's mostly a ghost town since Water Country closed their borders on top of the halt of trade between lightning and fire because of the skirmishes. All the gangs from Eastport relocated here over the years to compete with the local gangs. It's not settled. Territory brawls spring up even on the best days during tourist season. Ninja come here to knock off targets, to keep fingers on the pulse, and to stir up trouble. If you say so. I call this room. Yuji scampered back into the foyer to grab his duffel bag and drag it into the room. Get back out here, brat. I've got some questions for you. Yuji reappeared 2 minutes later. Jiraiya-sama ran a hand through his shaggy white hair. Have you been told about the fox? Mamoru blinked. Yuji nodded slowly after glancing at him carefully for permission. Genie-san mentioned it to me when I turned 10. He's been telling me more and more about it. Seiichi lends me the journal sometimes, so long as I promise not to read his cover entries. Genie-san and I get into huge discussions about the fox and how he's important, and how Kushina-chan dealt with him. So he's been instructing you on how your mother controlled the beast. The aged Jounin looked relieved. Wait, what? My mom? Kushina-chan is your mother, Mamoru said. She was the last carrier of the fox. Yuji looked as though someone had brained him. But Genie-san said that she was a little girl. She was when she received the fox. But that means that Genie-san is really old. Mamoru laughed. Sarutobi-sama is getting on in years, yes. He had mostly retired to let your father rule over the village before you were born. Yuji gobbled for a few moments, obviously trying to catch up. So Genie-san is how is that even possible? Secret sealing techniques. Maybe someday I'll teach you, Jiraiya-sama said. It's a Konoha secret though, so you'll have to prove yourself worthy. But it's so useful. It's like being able to send a letter instantly. Why wouldn't we share that with everyone? Because what if the enemy ninja in Kumo, who attack our northern border every other week even after all these years just because it's habit now all because after the Hyuga fiasco, what if they could use it too? Worse, what if they could tap into our letters? See who we're going to send to counter them, see what important fire people are going to be where? This is why we don't share, kid. We need any kind of edge we can get. The balance between the 5 major villages is tricky. I told you this. We're not at peace, but we're not engaged in an all-out war either. If Kumo would stop around and accept that non-aggression pact they've been throwing in our faces for 7 years now, we'd have a ceasefire across the board. Yuji grimaced. Okay. But I still think it's silly. Brat, didn't you listen to a word I said? It's not stupid, it's vegetatively dumb. This entire situation is beyond dumb. The way the nations interact is moronic. The way Kumo keeps expanding and amassing more and more military might, making all the other nations nervous and do the same, that's stupid. Jiraiya-sama leaned back in the couch and sighed. But I've been told I'm even more of a fool for hoping that someday we'll find peace, that all this bullshit gets wiped away and we can do things like share useful jutsu with everybody to make life better. Then I guess that means I'm a fool too? Asked Yuji. You got that right, kid. You want to be my fool apprentice? We can go try to show the world who's the fool together. Yuji chewed on his cheek for a moment. I guess so, fool-sensei. Jiraiya-sama grinned. Excellent. Welcome to the club. Mamoru shook his head and went to claim his own room. You still going to share with Mei-san? Asked the old jounin. Mamoru glanced back and shrugged. She suspects something is up, but it might reassure her a bit. I'd rather she didn't panic until the end. Yuji was glancing between them suspiciously, but both men ignored his questions. 2 nights after their arrival, Seiichi glanced into his parents' room to spot his mother tugging a pair of skinny jeans out of the bottom of her duffel bag and throwing them on the bed she and his father shared. Father had been a little nonplussed to learn that this place didn't stock futons, and that instead he was expected to share a queen-sized bed with Hiromi. From the bags under his eyes, going from sleeping in separate futons to a bed together had unsettled him. Seiichi was torn between pity and vicious glee. Mom then dug out a vibrant purple top that was low-cut enough that Seiichi was certain it was from the old days. Yuji was crowing with glee in the living room, bouncing around at Sushi-sama, who had agreed to escort him and Hiromi to a dance club and help get the underage boy in so long as he agreed to promise his mother he wouldn't drink at all. Father had been out scouting when this had been settled. Seiichi wasn't looking forward to explaining why everyone was missing when Mamoru got back because of course he was the one that had to stay behind and guard the suite. Not that he really wanted to go clubbing, but being forced to stay behind like this when everyone was so wound up was more than a little unfair. Atsushi-sama looked over the moon at the chance to ogle club-going women. Yuji was showing the old man his killer dance moves. After locating a plunge bra, Mom ripped off her shirt and regular bra without bothering with the door, and then began fumbling with the button of her trousers. Rolling his eyes, Seiichi shut the door for her. Mom had never been shy, but she had usually tried to act as though the thought of her son staring at her naked body wasn't quite the normal way of things. Practice the henge you're going to wear, said Seiichi, turning to Yuji. Sticking out his tongue, his brother ran through the hand seals quickly and came out looking like father had about 8 years ago. It was a little disturbing. How's that? Jiraiya-sama crowed with laughter. You look just like Takashi's Mamoru henge but with less gray. I've never seen him as the clubbing type. This'll be interesting. Seiichi walked over and poked a finger at the henge's eye. His father's image dodged properly despite the 2-foot difference between Yuji and the henge's eyes. Good. Mom will flip out, you realize. Dad's face took on Yuji's smile. I know. It'll be so funny. Ha. 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 Seiichi spun to take in Mom's unamused face. Despite the years, the skinny jeans and purple wrap sleeveless top fit her very well. She wore enough makeup that she could have passed for being about 5 years younger than she actually was. Atsushi-sama wolf whistled. Mom showed him the finger. I was a whore, but I wouldn't bang you if you paid me, old man. The image of his father bouncing over to his mom and clapping enthusiastically would never leave Seiichi, and would forever make it difficult for him to take Dad seriously. You are so rad, Mom. Why thank you, M-boy. Do you have to wear your father's face? It's a little creepy. He wouldn't go clubbing with me if I paid him. Father's face grinned Yuji's grin again. So this'll be a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Come on. It's either this or I go as a girl. I'm not so good at adult men. Getting them to sync up with me properly is hard. But Niken already tested me, and I passed. Fine. Just don't blame me when your dad blows a gasket. Mom grabbed Yuji's hand and swung it. You ready to rock the beat? They might even have a DJ. That would be so cool. The two headed toward the door as Atsushi-sama pushed himself off the couch. Have fun keeping house, Seiichi-kun. Seiichi was tempted to flip his superior off as the door closed behind the trio. Maybe Mom had rubbed off on him too. Okay, said Mei, glancing up at her son and trying not to freak out at how Mamoru's face was grinning at her. I've got to explain some things to you. Okay, shoot. Mamoru's no, Yuji's teeth were bright white in the streetlights. The click of her low heels on cobblestones was loud in the not quite empty street, but Yuji was silent in his sandals, as was Atsushi-san. Goddamn ninja. Clubs aren't just a place to dance. When I worked the streets, I would go there for a break, but other people use them like I use the streets, or the brothel, as a place to pick a partner up. We're just going to dance, but some people will be too drunk to pick up on our not interested in sex vibe. Yuji nodded, only the slightest flush on his face. Mei struggled not to stare. She had never seen Mamoru blush before. Damn, but she had missed out. This was so creepy. She felt creepy. That was her son. Anyway, these people are going to try to touch you, maybe even in places that really aren't appropriate if they're really far gone. You use your wicked skills to get out of their way before it gets to that, you hear me? Guy or girl, you don't let them touch you like that. Now, some of them are going to try to use dancing as an excuse. Like that grinding thing you talked about. Yeah, like that. Tasteless. You aren't allowed to do it until you're at least 18. So none of that. Okay, got it. Can't we just go to a place where that doesn't happen? Mei's lip curled. Mood changes quickly on the dance floor sometimes. I'll try to pick a nicer place, but there's no guarantees. Just try to stick close to me, okay? Got it. Mei reached up and ruffled Mamoru's oh-so-familiar hair. The illusion reacted properly and made something in her chest ache when Yuji smirked down at her. Now, if there is a DJ, you need to know some etiquette. Mei-san was struggling. Jiraiya could see it in the way she was oscillating between leaning closer to the henge and maintaining the usual space she kept between herself and her son. She knew the truth of the illusion, but she wanted to buy into it so badly. Poor woman. Jiraiya had to wonder how Takashi-kun handled it. Mei-san picked out a likely club, one that didn't have a long lineup outside the door full of giggly drunk girls, which disappointed Jiraiya, but he let it go, headed straight to the front of the line, and nodded at the doorman, shamelessly abusing the power of genjutsu. Since Mei and Yuji looked more than old enough, the burly doorman nodded respectfully, and let them in without blinking at the wave of protest from the lineup. He wove through the gyrating bodies and flashing lights, bound for the bar. He felt a little out of place, but it wasn't so bad that a few drinks wouldn't ease it. Mei and Naruto peeled off halfway across the dance floor and found themselves some space as the current song started getting blended in with a new track, the DJ carefully matching the beats on a battered set of turntables with a switchboard that had definitely been built about 30 years ago. Sound equipment was impossible to get new these days. Most of the speakers had to be from the last brief peace between the 5 nations. Anything electronic came from a city hidden deep in Wind Country's outback where researchers worked tirelessly to copy outdated technology with whatever minerals and oil they could dig up out there or have Suna ninjas sneak out of Earth. Most of San's GDP was generated by the Silicon City, or Circuit City as it was colloquially referred to. Currently, the city wasn't exporting unless you happened to be a billionaire. It was part of Wind Country's way of thumbing its nose at everyone else for letting the Chunin exam idea get blasted to pieces. The exposure Suna would have gotten at the gladiator-style final exam would have more than made up for their remote location. Jiraiya sipped his plain sake and searched the pulsing sea of dancers for a glimpse of his 2 charges. He found nothing until he escaped the bar with a bottle to see him through the evening and found a raised section of seats and tables for those who had come to drink and watch rather than dance. He located the duo dancing their own way in the middle of a very small space, surrounded by some people who obviously weren't as versed in the fine art of hip-hop besides the most basic bouncing to the beat and waving their arms in the air. As Jiraiya watched and partook in the passable liquor, other competent dancers began to gravitate towards them, though they gravitated towards them as well. Soon a little knot of about 9 people were having what Jiraiya assumed was a dance-off. Each had their chance in the center of the circle their fellow contestants carved out of the crowd and maintained for them. After one young man managed some very impressive breakdance moves that could have hurt a lot, Mei took over and made water look clumsy and jittery even as she somehow managed to emphasize every beat. She quickly switched it up with something a little more flailing, something similar to what Naruto had been showing off before they had left. Without missing a beat, she began to retreat back to the edge of the circle and beckon Naruto forward. The kid had a blast, grinning fit to split his face in half, before relinquishing the center to a newcomer that tried out something that looked very robotic. And then something made Jiraiya glance at the club door and grimace. Takashi-kun had found them. Mamoru's momentum dissipated when he hit the edge of the dance floor. Seiichi had told him where they had headed but hadn't been able to give him a particular destination. He had roamed the streets instead until a few young women in line for this club had squealed to each other about how similar he looked to some other hunk who had just jumped the line. He had made quick work of the doorman, which helped get rid of the bad taste in his mouth. The club, as all others he had ever visited, stank of sweat, alcohol, and pheromones, though it was early enough in the night that the last was only just beginning to mingle in the reek. A hand wave caught his attention. Jiraiya-sama was seated higher up. He made his way towards the man, weaving carefully through the dancers that were staggering more than dancing this close to the bar. He settled on the chair Jiraiya-sama offered him, and shook his head at a waitress carrying a tray at another table who glanced questioningly at him. "They're over there," the old jounin said, gesturing at a little group that was taking up a disproportionate amount of space and attracting a lot of attention from those dancing just outside the cordon they were maintaining around the floor they had claimed. The man in the center spun on his head before snapping back to his feet in time with the beat. Those watching cheered. Mamoru picked his doppelganger out of the cordon easily. The boy really had taken his face. His younger face. That brat. Jiraiya-sama laughed. Yes, he claimed yours was the only adult male henge he could do well enough. Where is she? Jiraiya glanced at him with an unfathomable expression. 2 people to his left. Mamoru picked her out. She had an air about her that very much reminded him of how she had been when he had first met her. She must have been keeping those clothes at the bottom of her drawers. Thank goodness. I can't imagine what sort of talk would have gone around if she had worn those back in the village. It's not something you'll have to worry about anymore. He nodded. Why did you bring them? Let them have their fun. That's what this last week is for. Besides, I get to have all these wonderfully energetic young women performing for me. Excellent research material. Anything to report? Mamoru shook his head. Same as the other nights. I saw many sneaking around, but they didn't seem interested in us, just their own targets. Seiichi hadn't detected any undue attention directed at our building when I checked in with him. Well, that's good. What now? Will you go back out there to double-check, or are you going to keep watch here with me? Or maybe even go join them? Mamoru scoffed. I know as much as that group bobbing in front of the speakers that the DJ is eyeing malevolently for messing with his sound. But you knew that the DJ was irked about his sound quality. He narrowed his eyes at Jiraiya-sama's grin. And you think people wouldn't notice how similar Yuji and I are? You're the undercover specialist. You could alter your face enough to take care of that problem. Mamoru just shook his head. Oh, there he goes. She taught him, I suppose? Yuji had claimed the center of the circle now. He wasn't quite as good as his company, but they seemed willing to give him time in the spotlight. I guess so. Seiichi said they would practice while I was at work sometimes. Jiraiya-sama shook his head. He's nothing like his father. I couldn't see Minato here in a million years. Dragging him to a quiet pub was a struggle. He was more at home in the library or at a training ground. And his mother, no, she was more focused on being strong. She liked a good party, but this is more modern than her seeing. Too much of a tomboy to be interested in the clubs like this one in Otafukigai. Mamoru glanced around, praying that no one had heard that last bit. Otafuku was too close to Konoha for it not to be suspicious. Ah, the South. All the wonderful women here. The heat that makes them wear such nice swimsuits. The music. Jiraiya-sama raised his sake dish, grinning blissfully. Southern fire is a treasure beyond compare. Mamoru was tempted to bury his face in his palms as people glanced at the old jounin with raised eyebrows despite how loud the music was. The waitress was eyeing him less than happily though, so Mamoru waved her over and asked for a light beer. It was just enough that her scowl slipped behind her professional mask. He tipped her well enough that she started smiling again as she disappeared to get his order. Purple caught his eye as Hiromi, no, she was Mei right now, as Mei took over the circle and proved as never before that she had nothing in the way of shyness. Not with the way she was apparently flirting with another member of the circle, moving deliberately to draw his eyes to her hips. Memur smirked and shook his head. That woman. Her target bowed and removed an imaginary hat in her direction with a flourish to concede defeat. Yuji looked faintly horrified. It was enlightening. Memur had never had the chance to witness his face while wearing that expression. Mei eased Yuji's horror by laughing and turning to him while beckoning him closer, still moving with the music. Yuji took her hand and let her spin and dip him, laughing with the rest of the circle as she set him back on his feet. She leaned close and shouted something in his ear loudly enough that he nodded and waved her off while returning to his place in the circle as someone else took over the center. She pushed through the throng, accepting pats on the back and hand clasps and nodding at those who acknowledged her without invading her space as she made her way to the bar only to notice Jiraiya waving her over. Her eyes then found Memur's, and she paused, her gaze flicking back to Yuji, as though to check that it was really him. Her smile faded a bit, but she approached them just as his beer arrived. Mei scooped up the tumbler and slurped at the foam before taking a large gulp and dragging another chair over to their table, grinning at his raised eyebrow. "Who said you could steal my beer?" he asked. "Well, you obviously ordered it just for me. I didn't want to insult your generosity." Jiraiya-sama snorted and refilled his sake dish. "Getting too hot for you out there?" Mei shook her head. "It was getting a little unnerving. I can't imagine Mamoru here out there, but then Yuji goes into the center, and everything is just so weird. I need alcohol to handle it." She reached out and ruffled Mamoru's hair as she stole his beer again. He tolerated this with a glance skyward. "You've got me pegged." "Ah. That's such a shame." She ran a finger down his arm. "You're graceful. I'm sure you'd be fine. And you're a quick study, I'm sure." He stole his beer back and took a long pull. "You need to get me far drunker than this to make me even consider it. Which you don't have time to do. Look." She followed his finger and spotted how a pair of girls from outside the circle were getting far too close to Yuji. Growling, she snagged Mamoru's beer, tossed back the dregs, and stalked back out on the floor, but not before catching the waitress. "Keep his beer coming, or whatever else you can get him to drink that's heavier," she told the girl, gesturing at him. "I'll cover it." Nodding with a smile, the waitress headed back to the bar to nab a pitcher full of cheap beer and was quick to refill his glass. Mei had disappeared back into the throng, safe from his glare, as Jiraiya-sama snickered. Mamoru woke to a dull ache behind his eyes, a dry mouth, and Hiromi curled up half on his chest. Anything warm exerted an irresistible force of gravity on her sleeping body, he had discovered over the past couple nights. Grumbling, he pushed her off and made his way to the door through the gloom. He could hear her shuffling into the warm spot he had left as he carefully listened at the door for anything odd before slipping out. Jiraiya-sama was in his usual spot on the couch, writing in the soft yellow light of a table lamp. He nodded acknowledgement to Mamoru without looking up. Leaving the old Jonin to it, Mamoru padded into the kitchen and got himself a glass of water from the tap without bothering with a light. The barest suggestion of a smudge of blue-gray on the eastern horizon told him it was around 4 in the morning. They had gotten back at around 2. He swallowed the dregs from his glass and found his way to an armchair in the living room, which he slumped into, rubbing his temples. "Anything?" "All's quiet. Are you going to go back to bed?" Mamoru shook his head. "I'm awake now. I'll keep watch." "She being clingy?" Mamoru ignored that. "A specialist is coming on Saturday. I requested the best. I'm fond of her, so there's no need to take drastic measures to ensure security." Jiraiya-sama arched an eyebrow at him. "You are a cold man. A good A&BU agent, but cold." Mamoru frowned at him. "I'm just doing my job." The Sannin nodded, but his raised eyebrows conveyed disbelief. "I heard a rumor about you from your comrades the last time I was in the village. I don't know if you know, but Hyuga Sora has 2 children with her husband." Mamoru crumbled, and Takashi struggled to keep the pain off his face. "I thought that was what would happen." "But you still agreed to the mission." "She refused me. There was no point in pining." Takashi shrugged. "Nothing would have changed her mind. She is stubborn in that way." "She is a Hyuga." Takashi paused. "You're saying bloodline was part of it?" "For them and the Uchiha, it always is. The eyes don't always breed true, so they pair their children carefully. She couldn't have accepted you even if she had wanted to." Takashi sighed. "I considered that, but that didn't seem to be her primary objection. Either way, the path is closed." Sarutobi-sensei was talking about easing you back into village life. How so? He wasn't particularly interested in going back to life in Konoha, knowing that all his old bonds would be frayed if not fractured. 13 years of separation. He was hoping you would temporarily drop out of ANBU and take on a genin team. Heh. I'd rather be sent back out and start all over again. That's what he thought too. But I think you need time being Takashi. You've been Mamoru for too long. I'm seconding Sensei's recommendation. Takashi bowed his head before meeting Jiraiya-sama's eyes. I'll consider it. Oh, and you are a quick study, but I think you need a lot more practice before you try that breakdancing thing again. Takashi managed to resist the urge to flip his superior off. Just barely. Yuji was ecstatic that he and Mom managed to hit the dance floor almost every night until Saturday. He got to see all sorts of moves his mom hadn't been able to imitate well enough to teach him. Some of the breakers were so awesome. And jump style was so cool. And crumping. And sea walk. And all those different shuffle steps. During the day, he and Mom would wander the streets, looking for groups that were doing what they did in the club in the light of day. They found a few, sometimes even managing to run into the people they had been dancing with the night before, not that they recognized him. Yuji didn't need to wear his dad's face and height during the day when no one was enforcing an age limit. They'd ask about him, especially when Dad was with them, but he and his mom would just say he was off somewhere else or sleeping. If Yuji was lucky, sometimes the dancers they ran into a couple times would bear with him and slowly teach him new steps. Mom bullied Dad into learning some breaking moves with him once. Yuji had always known his dad was super strong, but even their temporary sensei had been wowed when Dad had managed the balancing and contorting without flinching. Dad just didn't have much of a sense for the music, which made Mom snicker. Seiichi was a stick in the mud and just watched and laughed when he was with them. But the old perv, well, some of the B-girls and other female dancers had gotten sick of him. Yuji and Mom tried to stick with Niken and Dad after that. That was why Saturday threw him off so much. Dad was going to go out with them to grab stuff for breakfast and poke around as usual, but Seiichi grabbed Yuji's shoulder just before he headed out the door of their suite. I've got something I need you to look at. Yuji shared a glance with Mom. Oddly, fear was starting to creep into her face. Don't worry, Mom. I'll go with you after breakfast. You have to come back and get me. For some reason, Mom turned to Dad and studied his face for a moment before dropping into a crouch. Yuji, come here for a sec. Her voice was wavering. He hustled into her arms and hugged her tight, her fear beginning to infect him. I love you, she breathed into his hair. Okay? Don't forget that. Fear made him dig his nails into her back. Mom, what? I'm just nervous because someone got murdered last night. It was in the papers this morning. I'm sure it will be fine. I'll see you when we get back with breakfast. Seiichi, get over here. Mom pushed him away and pulled Seiichi and I into her arms for a moment as he patted her back. We'll bring home crepes or something, okay? Dad nodded, promised to keep Mom in one piece, teased her for worrying for nothing, and shut the door behind them. What was that? Yuji asked his brother. Seiichi shrugged. Who knows? Anyway, I got a message for you. It said I was supposed to show it to you right away. Geez, Genie-san can be kind of demanding. Couldn't it have waited until we got back? Niken shrugged. Come on. Atsushi-jiji was sitting on the balcony, writing as usual, Yuji noted as he followed Seiichi into his room. The book was on his bedside table. Naruto-kun said the message for him below the text directing Seiichi to make him read it. This was the first time Genie-san had called him Naruto-kun. I know this will be difficult, but it is no longer safe for you and your family to remain as things are. My agents in the south have noted unusual activity, much of it pointed your way. We have been incredibly lucky that Mamoru managed to keep you hidden as long as he did, but not even he is perfect. How they caught wind of you, I cannot say for certain. It could have been several stories that someone very clever pieced together, like the date of your arrival, the strange appearance of your parents and brother, or how your family could not be traced backwards, though your father did leave false trails to muddy those waters for a time. You and Seiichi have no birth records anywhere, except flimsy ones Mamoru manufactured. It could have been Jiraiya's visits. The cause is not important anymore. The point is that we must break up your family for everyone's safety. The mission is over. Your father is returning to Konoha, as is Seiichi. Your mother will go into hiding. As soon as Yuji read that, he threw aside the diary and sprinted for the door. Mom had known. Seiichi ran after him, but Yuji ignored his orders to stop, to come back. Instead, he plowed down the stairs. There was no sign of them in the lobby or in the street outside. The elevator was empty. For the first time, Yuji loathed how Dad was a better ninja than him. Crouching down in the lobby, he wrapped his arms around himself. Mom. Mei came to in an attic. The window had apparently been their entry point since Mamoru was standing guard in front of it. She considered panicking and beating him and howling her grief and terror in his face, but she knew it wouldn't do any good. So she just sat up and dusted off her shirt. Oh, you're awake. A woman wearing a white mask in the shape of a monkey's face with green and red markings on it emerged from the shadows. Who are you? Mei asked cautiously. I'm here to make sure you're safe. I was supposed to edit you before you woke up, but... Mamoru shifted. It's easier for you to buy into the memories if you have some affinity with them. I wanted your opinion. He moved away from the window and hunkered down near her. What do you want to have lived instead? Mei froze. So I'm not allowed to remember anything. Not allowed to recall watching Yuji grow up and return her love so unconditionally. Not allowed to languish in daydreams about waking up beside Mamoru or recall teaching Seiichi how to shave properly. Never again. Tears stung, but she had always suspected this would be how it would end. No. We can't take any chances. Yuji is more important than you can ever know. It's best for you if you don't remember anything about him at all. We will take you to anywhere you wish and set you up so your situation matches your memories. What were you going to give me if he hadn't insisted on my input? She asked the monkey woman. Geisha training? I was supposed to set you up in Port Muir in Wind Country. How was that safe? She asked, arching an eyebrow. We have people in Port Muir. They would have kept an eye on you. Mei glanced at Mamoru. And what if the memory block breaks? Monkey shrugged. Mamoru took over. You would probably be eliminated as quietly as possible. It would take too long to send someone to repair the block. Mei considered this carefully. Then I want you to set me up in Konoha. Mamoru froze. What? If I'm in Konoha, even if my block breaks, there will be a ninja able to repair it, right? Less dangerous for me. Anyway, give me that geisha training and some years of service. Give me a daughter who survived for 4 years before passing away. Have her buried as of yesterday. Send me to Konoha. Let me decide what I'll do when I get there. Maybe I'll start off waiting tables or something. If I'm in Konoha, there's a chance that I'll see Yuji again someday. Done, said Monkey. She reached forward with a pale hand and placed it on Mei's forehead. Mamoru's unsettled face was the last thing Mei saw as her vision darkened. Jiraiya sighed, knelt, and put a hand on Naruto's shoulder. Kid, come on. Back upstairs. Mamoru is going to let go of your genjutsu in about an hour. You can't suddenly change appearance in the hotel lobby. Naruto glared at him, the slightest traces of Minato's familiar scowl bleeding through despite the henge that gave him subtle traces of Mamoru and Hiromi-san's features. Back off. Shaking his head, Jiraiya grabbed the kid's ear and hauled him to his feet. Up you get. Come on. Not all hope is lost. I'll tell you how to find her, but first, you have to hear me out about everything and why all this is happening. Hissing, Naruto followed his ear into the stairwell. Jiraiya released the kid when he was one step ahead of him. Go on, said Jiraiya, placing both hands on the railings, herding the boy up the stairs. Naruto pounded up the steps rapidly, his head bowed, and shuffled to their suite door. Seiichi was waiting in the foyer, the diary in his hands. I'm sorry, he said when Naruto glared at him. Jiraiya swatted the boy upside the head. Don't go after Seiichi. He's ANBU. He can't disobey the Hokage. He's my brother. He's also Sarutobi-sensei's hand. That's what ANBU agents are. Seiichi has been one since he was a toddler. Forgive him. Besides, what did you think you were going to do if you did find your dad helping your mom into hiding? You can't go with her. You're not strong enough to protect her, so your proximity would just endanger her. Jiraiya slipped off his sandals and headed for the couch. Come, both of you. Sit. Seiichi bowed his head and strode over smartly. Naruto hesitated for a while, a nasty expression on his face, but he eventually gave in and threw himself into the other armchair. Seiichi, Mamoru will be heading out as soon as he finishes laying clues for the authorities. As soon as we are done here, you have a choice. Because you can help Naruto hem and Kyuubi with Tsunade's pendant but haven't had a chance to try attuning yourself to it, you can accompany us to find her and get her to hand it over. At that point you would head back to Konoha. The other option is that you head back now and meet up with us when we capture the pendant, attuning yourself then. Seiichi glanced at Naruto, but the boy refused to meet his eyes, more interested in staring down at his crossed arms. I'm not sure yet. Jiraiya nodded. Think about it. Naruto, stop pouting. My name is Yuji. Jiraiya snorted. Your name won't be there in a few minutes, brat. Yuji is dead the moment we leave the lobby. We need to develop a new identity for you so you can travel with me safely. This would have happened at any point during your time in your village had any strange ninja started sniffing around. This is what it means to be in hiding, kid. Naruto scowled. Pick a name. Katsuo. Good. Now we need to create a new face for you. How good are you at maintaining a henge while you're sleeping? Asked Jiraiya. Now the kid grimaced. He's pretty terrible, Seiichi said, glancing apologetically at his brother. He loses hold of it the moment he starts to drift off. His genjutsu ability is solid after all the practice we made him do, but it will take him a couple weeks to create even the most basic feel of a different hairstyle over his buzz cut. Okay, then we're going to give you a crutch for the first few months. Jiraiya got up and retrieved some ink and paper from his room. We haven't got much time. Boy, you have 20 minutes to build your new face and body. Seiichi, go pack for both of you. We have to be out the door in 40 minutes. Think about your choice as you're working. Hi, Jiraiya-sama. Seiichi snapped a salute and crisply headed into Naruto's room, probably figuring that there was more to collect there. Boy, you can't be blonde or have curly hair, and you can't have blue eyes, and you can't keep this face. Other than that, go wild. Katsuo fingered the tiny pouch strung around his neck as he followed the man who had been at Sushijiji through Southport's suburban streets, Seiichi an eye on his heels, looking strange as a lanky man with blonde dreadlocks. He was still shaken and desperately wanted to sulk, but Jiraiya wasn't giving them any time. He hadn't been kidding. Katsuo had felt his hair sans curls like his mom's 15 minutes ago for the first time. Dad's genjutsu had dissolved, and Yuji had died. Katsuo's eyes stung, but he just kept clutching the pouch. Inside was a piece of paper covered in carefully inked lines. It would maintain the most basic genjutsu feel of his appearance and henge, which had shaggy black hair, darker skin, and a couple snaggle teeth, while he was asleep. The henge was nowhere near as complete as the genjutsu he had worn had been, since it just enforced the visual basics with no real details, but Katsuo hadn't had time to develop anything more complex. Jiraiya had promised they would fix things when they got out of town. When at last they stood at the crossroads of the trail that led east towards the Narrows of Fire and then down into the southern arm and the track that connected the capital to Southport, Jiraiya stopped. Seiichi, your choice? Katsuo? Seiichi and I said, crouching down in front of him. Katsuo pursed his lips and couldn't meet his eyes. Seiichi sighed. I guess I'm going back to Konoha, sir. I wish you luck with tracking down Tsunadeheim. Please send me word when you succeed. Enjoy your return to the village. Takashi asked me to tell you that if Hokage-sama forces him to become a Jounin sensei, you're welcome to drop in on him. He said he'd help you find an apartment if you are allowed a life outside of headquarters. Seiichi bowed his thanks. Katsuo, I want you to carry this. You know how important it is to keep it safe. He pressed the journal into Katsuo's hands. I know this is hard. I want you to know that I enjoyed being your brother and that you can count on me anytime you find yourself in Konoha. You've taught me a lot of things I don't think I would have learned otherwise. I hope to see you soon. Shaking his head, Katsuo gave up on being angry at what he was positive was a betrayal for the moment, and wrapped his arms around Seiichi's waist. Bye, he whispered, clutching his brother hard. Tell Dad I'm pissed at him for not saying a proper goodbye to me. Tell him I'm not going to forgive him for taking Mom away. Seiichi squeezed him in return. I will. Katsuo tried to let go, he really did, but in the end, Seiichi had to use Kawarimi no Jutsu and left him hugging a log. And that was the last Katsuo saw of Yuji's old life. He pitched the log into the underbrush at the edge of the crossroads before shoving his hands in the pockets of his baggy jeans. Jiraiya set a hand on his shoulder. Come on, kid. We've got a lot of road to travel, and I want to avoid all that walking. The toads have offered to lend me a hand. Kato Eiko set the last of her kimonos in her chest before snapping the lid shut and pushing the latch in until the lock clicked. The carter was hauling the waterproof canvas sacks full of her pillows and blankets out to the cart. Here, whispered Ayaka-chan, grabbing one side of the chest. I'll help you load it. Nodding and biting her lip, Eiko grabbed the other steel ring and together they managed to haul the pine chest into the back of the cart. She managed to not look into her daughter's room, empty now. The heavy weight of sorrow in her chest made her stagger, but she could just pass it off as fatigue. She hadn't slept since the ceremony, too busy packing. Do you have to go? Eiko nodded, unable to meet Ayaka-chan's eyes. I can't stay here. Too many memories. Besides, what real geisha has a daughter, never mind survives her? No, I need something completely different. What will you do there? Wait tables, bus tables, who knows? I'll figure it out. I've changed scene plenty of times now, not like you, miss, I've never lived anywhere else. Ayaka threw up her hands. Fine. Be like that. Run from your sorrow instead of being brave and facing it head on. Leave me here to grow old and tend her grave. You will, won't you? Of course I will. All right. Ayaka shook her head. Don't bother. What use does a high-class geisha have for the proper technique when wiping tables? Eiko shook her head with a wry smile. A beautiful bitch. That's you? Don't forget your coat. Eat well on the road no matter how tired you get. Travel dirt doesn't contain all of the essential nutrients. Yes, Mom. Eiko accepted the coat and fastened 2 of the buttons before giving Ayaka a quick squeeze and hopping onto the cart's front bench beside the driver, who clucked to his mule. She forced a smile and waved to Ayaka as they trundled down the road until her fellow geisha waved back once and headed inside. To Konoha, ma'am? Asked the carter. Yes, we've gone over this so many times already. Yep, ma'am. We go. Want to be sure. Hiruzen looked over at Itachi, who waited passively at his shoulder despite the B-rank mission scroll he had handed over to his little brother's Genin team. This mission should have gone to a Chunin team, but his Chunin teams were out at the borders, keeping an eye on every section except for the northeastern segment. Kumo was still sending teams to gnaw at. Jounin and ANBU were handling that section. That left Genin handling what they could and a bit of what they couldn't when Chunin had yet to rotate back. Good luck. Hiruzen rubbed the bridge of his nose when the doors closed behind Team 14. What brings you in, Itachi-kun? An agent is waiting for you in your office. He claims to be Tiger, 19. That got Hiruzen to his feet. Really? Excellent. Come with me, Itachi-kun. The boy fell into position just behind him as they headed for his office. Itachi-kun preceded him through the door, eyeing the agent cautiously before stepping aside to let Hiruzen enter. It was a surprise to see a man kneeling where Hiruzen had been foolishly expecting a boy. Welcome back, Tiger, 19. It has been so long. I don't suppose you have been homesick? The man raised his head and shook it. Rat, 67 and his partner did very well. I was sad to have the mission end. The Hokage smiled. I'm glad those 2 managed to create that for you. And Yuji? With his godfather, though very unhappy. He was very attached to Rat's partner. I have the feeling he will try to hunt down her whereabouts despite our best attempts to dissuade him. You left him the book? He took it. Whether he will use it properly is in doubt. He is very angry. Hiruzen nodded as he settled on his well-worn cushion, Itachi kneeling a ways behind him, waiting to be dismissed. Did he manage to develop a new cover? Superficially. We were pressed for time just before I headed here. His godfather promised to help him complete it. They are heading to the rendezvous point. They promised to send word upon success. Then you have time off until then. Hiruzen held out a hand. Itachi-kun quickly set his crystal globe in it before resuming his position. The Hokage worked the jutsu and peered into the glassy depths. Rat, 67 has been delayed, apparently. It looks like there has been a change of plans because I expected him back in the village minutes before you. However, he is beyond the limits of my sight. I did not cross paths with him. There were probably complications in settling matters with his partner. I gave him some leniency in how to compensate her. Hiruzen passed the globe back to Itachi. In any case, I'll debrief you thoroughly later. Your quarters and headquarters have been opened up for you. Go get some rest. Actually, Tiger, 19 looked a little sheepish. I'm rather hungry and I would rather not find out what they're cooking in the mess hall. I have bad memories, forgive me, Hokage-sama. The old man laughed. It's interesting what stuck with you, Tiger. Itachi, 600 riot cash advance for Tiger here so he can eat on the town. Maybe you should act as his guide unless you'd rather not have company, Tiger? The man shook his head. No, company would be welcome. I don't know my way around at all anymore. Excellent. Itachi can catch you up on village gossip. Enjoy your rest. I'll be by to debrief you tomorrow before noon. Itachi, when you have gotten Tenza-san safely back to ANBU HQ, please come back. I have a mission for you. Hi, Hokage-sama, the 2 chorused. Dismissed. Uchiha Itachi was a reserved young man, professional to a fault, but he somehow exuded warmth and care. Tenza hadn't believed it of him, but the Jounin's younger brother was waiting for them outside admin, explaining everything without a word said. Uchiha Sasuke was the sweet and touchy type, especially when it came to his rival and hero, Itachi. The brothers took him to a Korean barbecue joint at his request and settled into a booth with him. He wanted something other than fish. And that was when Tenza learned that the Uchiha brothers were chatterboxes only when in each other's company with food to fight over. They traded good-natured insults, spat curses, and generally acted so much like Seiichi and Yuji had that Tenzu was hard-pressed to keep the ache in his chest from showing on his face. They told him all about village gossip, such as the tension between Sarutobi-sama and his youngest son, Asuma, how an irresponsible and ever-late yet brilliant jounin, Hatake Kakashi, had apparently made headlines by taking on a genin team, which Sasuke-kun was puffed up with pride over being a member of, and how their clan were the pariahs of the village. Revered for their genius but hated for their assumed treachery when it came to Kyuubi's attack. The boys didn't seem to know why their clan elders couldn't shake off the accusations with a sound alibi, but they were gleefully graphic in describing the sort of petty vandalism and bullying they brushed off, as well as how their compound and clan members were specially monitored by ANBU. Other restaurant patrons studiously ignored their conversation during this topic. Sasuke-kun then proceeded to gush over how Itachi-kun had been the Sandame's assistant, just like other Hokage candidates had been, and how he was still in and out of admin all the time. Itachi-kun was quick to change topics before his little brother got into full swing bragging. There are some interesting developments going on in the Hyuga compound as well these days. Hyuga Hinata was nearly totally blinded during a kidnapping attempt by a Kumo emissary that her father interrupted. The Kumonin threatened her harm in an attempt to keep Hayashi-sama at bay, but unfortunately, the attempt to free her resulted in her getting her face slashed. Sasuke-kun slapped the table and glowered at his brother. "Don't talk about Hinata-san like that. She's my teammate. I'm just trying to get Tenza-san up to speed. He has been gone for years. Hokage-sama ordered me to make sure he knew enough to understand village currents." Grimacing, Sasuke bent to grilling another bit of meat. "We heard rumors about that while I was away," Tenzu admitted. "They say she's blind. Better bargaining position, cover story to keep them from trying to kidnap her again, or inability of the Mednin?" Itachi and Sasuke both studied him before Itachi continued in a voice so low Tenzu only understood by reading his lips. "She's competent enough but kept in the background. You'll have to ask your superiors for details, but know that she is blind." It was more information than Jiraiya-sama had ever provided. Tenzu understood the last bit's emphasis. Itachi returned to normal volume. Her younger sister is apparently a stunning ninja even though she has yet to complete the now required 3 years in the academy. Her father is moving to have her made heir in her sister's stead. There is protest since this would break the line of succession and because there is a group that has pointed out that Hyuga Niji, the son of Hayashi-sama's younger twin brother, is more skilled than both of them put together with half the training, so if there is going to be a break in tradition, it would be best to pass over both girls and install Niji instead. "Which is bullshit," Sasuke-kun muttered. "Hinata-san has worked very hard to keep up with us. It's awful that her father is dismissing her efforts." Tenzu filed away how Itachi squeezed his brother's shoulder briefly. Tenzu was not at all surprised that clan matters were the subject of gossip here. In the fishing village, only his family had managed to keep truly private matters like who Yuji was and what their true purpose there was quiet. Anything else, like Mamoru and Hiromi's frequent fights, had been picked apart by the next afternoon. What about factions in the council?" Sasuke glanced at his brother hopefully, but Itachi shook his head. "We don't discuss those in public." Interesting. When Itachi-kun returned much later that evening, he seemed calm despite the curiosity he was certainly feeling. Itachi had been running very standard jounin missions for a while now. The assistant position had been short-term, as promised, but Hiruzen had dragged him back from the border skirmishes with Kumo a week ago. "Itachi-kun, I'm sure you have long known about the Kyuubi and your clan's supposed ability to control it." The boy nodded, his face remarkably blank given how sore a topic this had been for the Uchiha for over 12 years. This was why the boy would go far. He thought before he dove into something stupid. That was what a good Hokage needed, the ability to pause, listen, and think before reacting. "I have a job for you that requires something a little different. You'll be studying with Marino Ibiki and Yamanaka Inoichi to prepare." Jiraiya had a disgusting notion of how travel was supposed to work, but it was damn convenient, Katsuo conceded after wriggling out of another toad's throat and feeling how much cooler it was hundreds of kilometers north of their previous location. Eastport was very far north of the little village on Fire's border with T-Country, and even farther than Southport. The purpose of their stop in the little village had been to give Katsuo an opportunity to perfect his personality and mannerisms as Katsuo, as well as improve upon the reality of his cover, from the feel of his hair to the subtle variations in skin tone between the top of his fingers and the sides. A fair few of the people in the border village had the same ethnic background Katsuo did, and the remoteness of the village apparently made it a good place to study before leaving a false trail into tea country. They were in Eastport for some woman called Tsunade. To be specific, they were here for her necklace. He wasn't convinced that this wasn't a silly quest. He couldn't see how some stupid blue crystal worn by some dead guy and passed along to his descendants was going to help them. Jiraiya had explained it again and again, but how a necklace was going to help contain this invisible fox supposedly stuck in him, Katsuo was not getting. However, Jiraiya had promised to tell him where Mom was hiding if he cooperated. For that info, Yuji, no Naruto ahem, Katsuo could play the sweet little boy wheedling a treat out of this old lady who had apparently been one of Jiraiya Jiji's teammates. So Katsuo trailed after Jiraiya as he wandered through the derelict sections of Eastport where the remaining gangs had set up a splendid underground with some of the most extensive gambling facilities in fire. Cockfights, dog races, slot machines, card games, horse racing, if you could bet on it, it was likely that it could be found in this district. This was apparently just the sort of environment a sweet old granny lady thrived in, though Jiraiya Jiji had worryingly described her as very strong, with a short temper and maybe bitter? Katsuo was desperately hoping that his sweet old granny image won the battle for reality. They worked their way through a couple dingy establishments, Jiraiya pulling out a photo of a young blonde woman to coax remembrances. Is that from when she was 20 or something? Katsuo asked after another person had shaken his head and shrugged helplessly. Wouldn't she look really different now? Nah. She's pretty vain. Being the best medic ninja in the 5 nations, she has more than enough skill to regress her appearance to her 20s. She hates looking old. If I was a psychologist, I might go on about how the way she clings to the age when she was the most damaged is telling and that sort of shit, but I'll leave that to Konoha's quacks, not that any of them have had a chance to actually talk to her in more than 10 years. Grimacing at that bit of information, Katsuo glanced around, looking for a new subject. How old is Eastport? Why do you ask? I thought concrete was hard to do now. Dad said something about mixer trucks or something. Yeah, yet another thing we lost to the ninja age. You ever heard of gas and the combustion engine? Maybe in Southport? They had noisy boats there. Jiraiya glanced back at him and quirked a corner of his lips up. Yeah, that sounds right. A motorboat, sure, the rich like to show off in them, but you wouldn't have seen a car in Southport. Their streets weren't built to the old code, so any vehicles that by some miracle have survived aren't permitted within city limits. Jiraiya seemed to know a lot of useless stuff. Is this going anywhere? Geez, brat, patience. I'm trying to give you some history. Oh, hang on. And the man was off again to flap his photo in someone's face. Amazingly, this person actually nodded thoughtfully after squinting at the photo. Yeah, I saw her. She got fleeced clean at a dice parlor up in the North End. The Grey Mats. It's one of the best ones, good reputation for playing fair and ensuring the dice aren't weighted or any of that shit. No luck at all, that one. The Finns and the Yazzer both loaned her cash, apparently, so she skipped town a couple days ago, running out on her debts when their first goons went out to try to collect on her. Those guys haven't gotten out of the hospital yet. Any word on where she was headed? The bloke shrugged. Far away from here, I guess. Somewhere the Yazzer and the Finns don't have friends, though she wasn't too worried about them from what I heard. Sorry, can't help much more than that. Thanks for your time. No problem, old man. Good luck finding her. Sighing, Jiraiya turned back to Katsuo. Well, that sucks. Where to next, old man? Such an impudent brat. You're nothing like either of your dads. Katsuo just stuck out his tongue. This was so typical of Tsunade. Borrow money, often using ninja honor she didn't have as a lending point, gamble and inevitably lose it, repeat until thugs come to collect, smear said thugs into the pavement, and skip town. Repeat ad nauseum. Poor Shizen. That girl, no, she was a grown woman now. Either way, she had been dealing with her master's habits for well over a decade now. How Dan's niece had managed to become a functional adult with good morals was beyond Jiraiya given what she was exposed to, but the miracle was proof that there were gods out there, or that Dan and his sister and brother-in-law had managed to pound the lessons so deeply into Shizen's skull that not even Tsunade could pry them loose. Jiraiya was grateful. He was hoping that Shizen would help them. But all this was dependent on his coming up with a good direction to continue the search in. Naruto curled up tighter under his covers and resumed his deep, even breathing. His hand was swathed in bandages from chakra burns. He had finally mastered the second step of Rasengan this evening, shredding the rubber ball. The bag of balls had been replaced with a couple bags of balloons. It had been hard to convince the kid to learn Rasengan. Naruto had gotten over his shock during their stay in that little village and was now well and truly pissed off with how the undercover mission had ended and did not want to understand why it had been necessary. In short, he was acting like a boy that had just become a teenager, convinced he was right, the world had wronged him, and the world owed it to him to make things right again. Jiraiya had forgotten how annoying that phase was, though Minato hadn't really gone through it. That boy had been so self-contained and sunny. If only his son had inherited that. The boy had listened with enthusiasm to the story about Minato creating Rasengan though. He had started showing interest in his real parents as Jiraiya and Takashi had begun teaching him about ninja and politics when he had turned 8, but Jiraiya had always felt that at least some of the interest was an act to keep Jiraiya's disappointment at bay. Since leaving Southport, Jiraiya felt that more of the enthusiasm was real. He decided that for tonight the kid could be spared a watch as he dug through his pack and unfolded his very large and detailed map of fire. He quickly pinpointed their location in Eastport, and traced the various routes his quarry could have taken again. North took her to some small fishing villages and lighthouses. Only 1 in 10 of them were actually still functioning given how 1 in 12 of the marked villages were ghost towns. Jiraiya explored routes more inland until one struck towards Otafukigai. She would never take that route. It took her too close to Konoha. However, a little farther south, a route would take her to the capital, the Red City. Well, it wasn't actually the real capital, but it was the center of everything in fire. The daimyo's palace was a little northwest on a peninsula jutting into Sacred Lake. The Red City had some very good gambling. It also was a place Tsunade hadn't visited for 5 years, so her reputation in the city might have died down enough that she would be able to schmooze herself a line of credit or 2 or 3. Yeah, definitely an option, especially since he had finally found someone who thought they had seen her heading out on the West Road. He traced out the other routes just to be sure. It would be the height of irony if she managed to skip herself so far southwest that she ended up in Southport. Talk about crossing paths. Eiko had found that she really didn't like sitting on the bucking seat beside the carter as every bump, dip, and rock in the road made sure to announce their presence to her seat bones like those infatuated boymen that had been hard to shake off sometimes. Besides, sitting all day was not going to maintain her figure. Instead, she had ended up walking alongside the cart at a good clip to keep up with the pace the mule was kept to. Since drinking in the scenery of the roadside was only good for so long, she had filled her time by chattering at the carter, who had turned out to be a little clumsy in the common tongue. At first, she had recited all the poetry she had memorized during her training and career to please her customers and anyone else at whatever function she had been brought to brighten up. He had missed the meaning of many of them, but he had seemed content to listen quietly on the occasions that she would retrieve her biwa and strum it in order to add to the effect or slash and take advantage of the sometimes sumptuous acoustics of the terrain they had passed through. When eventually she had grown bored with this game, she had begun probing him for his backstory. He had been shy about it, perhaps an illegal immigrant, not that the daimyo was all that effective at enforcing his border policies. Eventually, she had managed to fluster him enough that he had jabbered a couple embarrassed sentences in his native tongue. It was a choppy language with a different sentence structure if his rough literal translations were correct. Glad for a new game, she had made him name everything and anything in his native tongue and correct her pronunciation until she had it right. Over time, she had pestered him into giving her verbs and pronouns and other bits and pieces of speech. Her first attempts at sentences made him laugh. You say ha. You say, the hill is erect. Did I? She asked with an easy smile. I am sorry. It would be him? He nodded, and she resumed mangling his language determinedly. He had a very familiar laugh when startled into free amusement, but she couldn't say where she had heard it before. She would just have to make him laugh until the pleasant tingly feeling in her brain resolved itself into a memory. This time Jiraiya made them travel on foot. The old man wanted to flash his photo at people on the road to confirm that they were going the right way. Katsuo pulled on the jean jacket he had acquired in Eastport and buttoned it up to the collar. It was early October, which, timeline issue. Late October now and then November 5th for arrival at Suna? Not gonna happen. Was apparently quite a bit chillier here than in his old village. Maybe it had something to do with the altitude. They had to cross quite a few mountain ranges to get to the Red City from Eastport. Come on, brat, we haven't got all day to get out on the road. Yeah, coming. Katsuo slung his pack over his shoulders and slipped on his sandals. Once they cleared the limits of the little roadside village, he set to complaining as they picked up the pace to a jog that wouldn't look too fast for a civilian but would get them places faster than a crawl. Kami-sama, civilians moved slowly. Geez, do we really need this Tsunade woman's necklace? Don't you trust the seal my blood dad made? It's not about trusting, brat. We trusted in the seal on Mito-sama and your mother. There was just a weak moment. I'm not a girl, so there's no way I can have a baby. There's no way the seal on me is going to weaken. This isn't the same seal used on your mother. It's something your father came up with, a blend of what she taught him and what he extrapolated on his own. We have no idea how it's going to handle the fox long term. That's another reason why we had to get you out of the village, and why Takashi-kun had two methods of contacting Sarutobi-sensei immediately. If something had happened to weaken your seal, with Tenzu and Takashi watching, it would have been noticed quickly and I could have been called in to use the key to strengthen it, or a seal master could have been brought to you immediately. Katsuo kicked a pebble off the hard-packed dirt road, and it bounced obligingly out of the rut left by carts and wagons before landing in the scrubby undergrowth that grew in the woods to either side of the road. That sounds like a sucky deal for my village and Southport. Who's to say you would have gotten there fast enough to save the people there? That's why Takashi-kun chose that small fishing village, probably. There's a mission office in Southport, so there's always some ninja. That twisty mountain pass between your village and Southport might have slowed the QB down, confined him to your valley for enough time. Why not just send me to you if you've got the key that could fix me if anything happened? Jiraiya Jiji grimaced. Kid, I'm a spy for Konoha. I go all sorts of places that you can't take a baby or a young kid, especially when I was trying to hunt down the bastards behind what happened to your parents. Besides, what sort of life would that have been for you? No, it was better to have you grow up down in that little village. You had a chance to learn how to be kind, to make friends, and to taste a normal life. We wanted that for you. Thanks for ripping it all away. Katsuo glared at the roadside. Kid, I was supposed to take you when you were 5. I left you there for just about 8 more years. And you couldn't have just left me there forever? The old man stopped short. Don't be selfish. Takashi has something of a life in Konoha. Tenzu does as well. And what about your mom? Didn't she have other dreams? Was the whole world supposed to be put on hold so you could play cabin boy down on the Kanuza Sea? Katsuo clenched his fists. You could have left me with Mom. She promised me that she would have taken me wherever she went. I would have helped her be a geisha or whatever she wanted. Your dad left the fox for you for a reason. We were hoping that Takashi would raise you to be responsible enough to follow through. Well, sucks to be you. I'm not interested in being one of your ninja. I'll help you get this necklace from the Tsunade woman, and then you're keeping your promise and telling me where my mom is hiding. Got that, old man? Jiraiya arched a bushy white eyebrow at him, a deadly serious look on his face. We'll see, brat. Let's go. We've got a long way to go, and if we're too slow, she'll have already left. The Red City was as pretentious as Jiraiya remembered. Skyscrapers. Of all the dumb things man had invented that had been rediscovered after the Dark Ages before the creation of the 5 nations, glass skyscrapers had to be chief. Now, the Red City was not placed as far south as it could have been, where the worst earthquakes seemed to pop up, but still, this was pretty dumb. Shortly before the posturing with Earth over who was top dog economically, which had morphed into the Third Shinobi War, had ended, they had been constructed as a showy representation of fire's prosperity. If a whopper hit the city, any pedestrians would be sliced to ribbons. Jiraiya gave the glass monstrosities a wide berth. Naruto gave him funny looks but did the same. Fire's big banks and investment firms were welcome to take up multiple floors in them as far as Jiraiya was concerned. He pulled out his picture of Tsunade and, after refamiliarizing himself with the districts where most of the gambling parlors were, began stopping people again. The first 4 areas were duds, so he and Naruto decided to hit a kebab joint for lunch before starting in on the 5th district. The smell of roasting lamb from the shop had been unbearable. Greasy kebabs wrapped in tinfoil in hand, he and Naruto ambled back out onto the street only for Jiraiya to stop dead. It wasn't fair that she was more beautiful than he remembered while her aura was the ugliest he had ever seen it. He rewrapped his kebab quickly and put it in Naruto's hands. Tsunade. Shizen. Both women paused and turned to him. Ah. Jiraiya-sama. Tsunade's apprentice quickly bowed, the pig in her arms protesting being squished by the motion. Tsunade cocked her head at him with a sneer and nodded slightly. Jiraiya. He let her rudeness slide off his back. Considering the amount of pestering Sarutobi-sensei had been subjecting her to, it wasn't surprising. It's been a long time since I've had time to track you down and catch up. Where are you headed? Shizen looked miserable at the angry tension between them until she spotted Naruto behind him. Who's that? Katsuo-kun. My current apprentice. Tsunade? Tsunade narrowed her eyes. What could you possibly have to say that the geezer hasn't already written 10 times over? You'll have to tell me what he said first. I'm here on the kid's behalf, not his. On Katsuo-kun's behalf? Shizen peered at the boy, who snorted. Are we moving this inside any time soon? We're not nearly as entertaining as the street dances, but we're attracting as much attention, said Naruto, glancing scornfully at those watching the confrontation, some of whom glanced away guiltily. This kid sure has a mouth on him, said Tsunade, eyeing the boy. Not at all like your last apprentice. Jiraiya shrugged. He's not a happy camper. He's right though. Where were you headed? That's near again. There's a good bar a couple streets over. They've got some rare stuff. Clean. Private. I was hoping it was private enough that I wouldn't run into any old acquaintances, so I guess you got lucky. Indeed we did. Led on. Jiraiya made a gallant gesture that they continue in the direction the ladies had been walking before and fell into step beside Tsunade while Naruto held up the rear with Shizen, who kept studying him curiously. The bar was private all right. Little booths everywhere with high partitions and sound-muffling curtains. Katsuo wasn't very worldly, but he could see that this bar would be an awesome location for holding secret meetings like the one they were currently in the midst of. The old man looked torn between being nauseatingly happy and depressed at being in the bitchy lady's presence, but he hid it after a while behind an business mask that Katsuo had seen a lot of in the past couple weeks. The lady was pale, blonde, but nearly had brown eyes like a normal person. Katsuo was relieved at that mercy. The younger Shizen lady, who Jiraiya Jiji had told him would probably be around and was the Tsunade lady's apprentice and attendant, was also normal-looking, with pale skin, black hair, and dark eyes. Katsuo, with his deep brown skin and green-brown eyes, felt shifty as the oddest-looking person there after Jiraiya. The two old teammates were discussing whatever their geezer-sensei had talked to Tsunade about before. Apparently, he had wanted her to return to the village and get her bad habits under control before the daimyo got sick of turning a blind eye to her exploits and marked her as a missing ninja. He's got no right, Tsunade was snarling, a sake dish in her hand. After all I sacrificed. After all my family did. If I want to gamble away my family's fortune, that should be my choice. It's not like the sharks I borrow from are legal. Jiraiya shook his head. Some of them are, if only partly. But I heard that you've succeeded. What? I heard that you've currently bottomed out your family's funds. That's why the geezer's throwing a fit. The banks have come knocking on his door because they can't find you. What are you using as collateral these days anyway? Shizen looked uncomfortable. Tsunade waved her hand carelessly as she took a sip